all good. We're all healthy. Hi, Robbie. Good to see you too.
Good luck. Oh, I'm betting against you.
Okay. Okay.
It's just a couple of minutes away, we believe, so we'll start as soon as he arrives. Apologies.
welcome to today's meeting of the Combined Authority of the West of England, and welcome to those who are viewing online. I'm Dan Norris from the West of England Combined Authority, and just to quickly introduce my committee colleagues, we have Richard Samuel, who's come in at very short notice because Kevin Guy, the leader of Bath and North East Somerset Council, I think has COVID. So poor old Kevin, please send him our regards, Richard. Then we have Marvin Rees, the leader of Bristol City Council, to the right of Richard. And then to right again, we have Toby Savage, the leader of South Gloucestershire Council. Welcome to you all. And to my left, we have Richard Bonner from the Local Enterprise Partnership, who is a non-voting member of this committee. And I'm also pleased to welcome Graham MacDonald, who I think is delayed, is on a train coming down, the Managing Director of the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives. And we've got
Graham isn't here.
And we've got Jim Taylor here as well. Where's Jim? Jim?
No, so Jim is coming at 1:30.
Oh, Jim.
Graham isn't here.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Okay. So we've got Jim coming late, and Graham isn't going to be here, but we welcome Jim when he arrives. And then before we move on to the main agenda item, as normal, some members of the public are joining our meeting to present their statements. Please note all the statements received have been circulated and read by committee members and are also available to view on the Combined Authorities website. The next item, item 2, is apologies for absence. Everyone's here, so there's no apologies. Okay, next item is item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, the minutes. The minutes of the meetings held on both the 18th of January of this year and the 27th of January this year are included in the agenda pack. Do members have any comments? Obviously, you had to be present. I'm not sure if you were in those, Richard. Are there any comments, please, gentlemen? No? Okay, in that case, can I sign the minutes as a correct record of those meetings, please? Thank you very much, Toby. Okay, item 5 is chair announcements. I have none today. Then item 6, these are items from the public, questions, statements and petitions, which can be up to a period of 30 minutes in duration. Questions, we've received 13 questions from 8 individuals, and the details have been circulated. Written answers have been published on the West of England website alongside the agenda papers. Moving to statements, we've received 17 statements for today from members of the public. Up to 3 minutes per statement will be permitted today for those who have asked to speak. I'd be grateful if the individuals who are speaking could please summarise their points as we have read all the statements, and which of course are also published on the website. So I'll now call the speakers who have indicated they want to address us in turn. Some people can't be present but have asked for others to make a statement on their behalf. So just so people viewing online and here in the room understand what's going on. The first person I can see is David Redgewell. David's got the mic in his hand. Off you go, please, David.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So the first point I want to make is to make sure we keep the budget for the mass transit project in the Bristol Bath City region. I'm not going to get into designs of whatever it is, trams, trains, undergrounds, just the principle of keeping the project with some funding and we can develop it. My second point really is about just make sure Metro West that we won't go through today with the Portway Park and Ride, and we push the money through for the revenues put on the Severn Beach line, and we put the capitals into Portway Station. That is on the agenda today. It's very important to Bristol City Council and to Marvin, and we've got to make sure it goes through. I'm a member of the Transport Board, both for yourself and for him, so let's just make that point. Today is important for Metro West. And I just want to say, I've said to Toby, we need the planning permission for Henbury Station so we can get that project moving, £45 million, and we don't want to start getting into difficulties with the government on financing. On buses, well, that's a real concern. I was very pleased to read your point in the West New Press, Mayor, this morning, making it clear that Metro Westlink was a rural project for rural connectivity into mainline buses. We've always said it, you've said it. It's never been a replacement for mainline buses or secondary buses or supported services. So we're in a very difficult position. We've got parts of East Bristol, some of the poorest parts of Bristol, some Werburgh, St Paul's, Aubrey Court, it's breaking my heart, this. South Bristol, Knoll, Philwood. I spent a day at Southmead Hospital with the unions and with the trust, trying to explain that they don't have evening and Sunday bus services, and they've lost their services. The nurses are very upset. I know they've written to you, the RCN. The trust is also asking for urgent meetings because South Gloss and Bristol work with the trust to put those buses in place in the first place. They will go on the 3rd of April, and there's some real issues, and some of the bus operators have now spoken out saying this is a disastrous situation. Got the same situation in South Bristol Hospital, and we've got the same situation in South Bath, and particularly in the Baines area as well. Now, I've got to congratulate Toby a little bit, because he's been running around putting buses back in the last couple of days. I don't know how far he's got, but I know he's working away trying to put buses back on emergency contracts. So I will thank him for doing that, because, you know, and he spoke to him at Cabinet last week, and something's happening in South Gloucestershire. They're trying to get buses back to cover some of the school runs. Brissington School's been on to me. They've lost their bus services. St Brendan's College has lost its bus services. Bath University has lost some of its services. These will be very, very difficult, Mayor, for these people to get to school, to college. And we just need to find answers. Franchising's fine, but it's a long-term solution. We need precepting powers, and the transport levy is not working. That's the issue. And we can use BSIP money on some new routes. And just for the benefit of Richard and Ken and my great friend, the Transport Director behind me, I am meeting first next week to see what we can do with some new BSIP routes, to see if we can help you down with some new routes. We'll see what comes of that, but at least I'm trying to give it a good go. So there we go. That's where we are. It is a disaster. It is the biggest set of bus cuts in North Somerset and the city regions. We're working very hard on the bus services with the bus service improvement plan. That's working, and Westlink, but the support services are a real issue and becoming a real serious issue. And I'd ask everybody in this room to try and review that, urgently look at it and see what we can do. And I'm grateful for any emergency contracts are going in position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Appreciate that. Is Andrew Smith present, please? Andrew, welcome. Off you go, please.
Good afternoon. To reduce congestion, improve air quality, Okay, right, I'll start again, sorry. To reduce congestion, improve air quality, lower carbon emissions, and generally for the well-being of its communities, the West of England needs to make many more of its journeys by bus. However, the bus service is currently in turmoil, with routes and timetables changing all the time. Not only does this make this far less likely for any of the above to be achieved, but it also imposes significant hardship on those that depend on this service. People will only make much greater use of the bus service, making it part of their daily routine, if the network is comprehensive and stable. The failure of deregulated bus services since 1986 to provide such a network is a major factor in its inability to increase bus usage. In a deregulated bus market, commercial decisions determine the network, which makes it uncertain and unstable. This is amply demonstrated by our area. The Bus Act 2017 is a tacit admission by the government that the bus deregulation has been a disaster. The Mayor recently launched an enhanced partnership aimed at improving bus services, but an EP still means a deregulated bus market with its lack of a comprehensive and stable network and consequent failure to deliver the increase in bus usage we require. An EP is one of the two options that the Mayor could have chosen. The other is franchising. This can deliver the increase, as London demonstrates. It is also the option most other combined authorities are pursuing. The argument is often advanced that franchising is too expensive, referencing Greater Manchester. However, as Bus Back Better, the National Bus Strategy states, there are many models of franchising. The states of Jersey saved 800,000 by franchising, as well as increasing bus usage by 32%. The essential point is that with franchising, the network is determined by the authority according to the needs of the community. Until a scheme is prepared and assessed, you cannot possibly know the cost. And any cost must be set against the cost of not franchising. More journeys by car, increasing congestion and emissions, loss of amenity to the community and where to work and shop, especially where no other form of transport exists. Cost to the local economy, restricting the employer's access to staff, and business revenue. If the Mayor really wants to address the bus crisis in the West of England, then he needs to publish a statutory notice that WECA intends to prepare a franchising assessment without delay, an action that would be supported by the constituent authorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, Jackie Head is next. I understand Jackie can't attend, but I think Ian Downey is going to speak on her behalf. Ian, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Jackie also asked me to provide you a short transcript of this statement as a courtesy. Pass it to Vicky? Yeah, thanks. Since 2021, our Sustainable Transport Group has been having joint meetings with transport planners in Baines and Wecker, following our report, Have Your Say, Sustainable Transport in the Chew Valley, which received responses from 410 households across the area. It showed that 76% of car users would be more likely to move to public transport if it lowered their carbon footprint. Over these 2 years, we've lobbied for more reliable, joined-up and frequent public transport to enable people to leave their cars at home and help decarbonise transport in the region. During this process, new fixed-route services to be funded by BSIP were put out to tender by Wecker to help this transformation happen. When it became clear that these had been rejected as too expensive, competing with Westlink and financially unviable, we wrote Making a Case for the 672, a report which included clear evidence that this existing fixed-route service was of vital importance to a number of individuals for whom transition to DRT was likely to be difficult. Reliant bus users of the 672 have just 2 months to completely change their behaviour towards DRT. They have to budget to double their present travel costs for a journey to Bristol to do so. How is this appropriate when trying to encourage people to decarbonise transport in the region and support people in the present economic squeeze on their finances? The BSIP services in the Chew Valley were put out to tender as hourly services. If they were too expensive, why wasn't a lower frequency considered? Our view is that footfall on DRT would be likely to increase if people can use it in combination with the 672 fixed route. If an additional planned 672 return journey which enabled people to travel after school and return in the evening were introduced, we believe it might increase uptake further. It's clear that whilst COVID saw a dramatic increase in passenger footfall on buses, there's been a year-on-year increase in footfall on 672 since 2021, and anecdotally it appears to be more busy again with the introduction of the clean air zone in Bristol. We appreciate that DRT has potential benefits in terms of accessing key areas beyond the Chew Valley, such as Bath, Keynsham, Midsummer Norton and Wells. We fear it will not have the capacity without a fixed route within the Chew Valley to provide for all journeys within the valley. Our research carried out in the Chew Valley in 2021 showed that 85% of journeys to work were by car, and 25% of all workplaces were within the Chew Valley. 77% of all education, 72% of exercise undertaken, and 60% of all medical appointments took place within the Chew Valley. 57% of all shopping trips were within the Chew Valley. Overall, 50% of all journeys taken by people living in the Chew Valley are within the Chew Valley. Overall, 82% of journeys travelled in the Chew Valley were by car. We would like to see the 672 extended for a minimum of 6-month period as a way of transitioning people and making DRT successful. Through ticketing, where there is one fee for the whole journey, so there is not a financial penalty for moving to DRT, and a proper public information programme about the urgent need to decarbonise transport and move from private car to public transport use. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, and I'll get that transcript that you mentioned later. Thank you. Okay, are Ian Becky and Brendan Taylor present, please? Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Okay. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Dad. I'm not going to, I think we all know the buses are in shambles at the moment, but it's getting better. I've come here today to try and save the route 47 between Bristol, St Paul's, Eastfield, Fish Ponds, Downend and Yates. The 47 is getting cut from the 2nd of April and a lot of elderly people require that route, particularly through the St Paul's area. Photos on social media showed the other day a bus was full and standing of passengers. From the 2nd of April, they will be losing that bus service. Meanwhile, Stagecoach are expected to take over the Park and Ride with the new Route 9 cross-city service from Bridlington Park and Ride to Portway Park and Ride via the city centre. My question to Stagecoach is, how can they run a frequency of the Route 9 every 15 minutes if they can't even run what they've got now at an hourly frequency? So how are they expected to run a every 15-minute frequency? I'm also here to talk about the Portway Park and Ride station that's due to open later in the autumn. This will provide great benefit to the customers living in Shirehampton, Avonmouth and for connections to the M5. But my point to you is that trains are the way forward. We need the budget for the Hanbury line, and we need it now. And as someone who is an advocate for Great Western Railway and has many friends in Great Western Railway, I put forward to you that trains are the way forward, and there needs to be one ticketing in place that allows trains and buses to integrate. We need better integration with trains and buses so that people can use public transport again. I also say to you that rural bus services are getting cut, which needs to be saved. All the big lemon services like the 516, the 506 and the 516 are all getting cut. You are replacing them with a demand service, but how successful will this be? As someone who spent a lot of time in Scotland, I have seen that on-demand services in such as places as Inverary and Inverness are not successful. So we need to have a look at our public transport system very urgently. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you very much. That was really well presented. Thank you. Is Joanne Adams here, please? Joanne? No? Okay. We'll move on to the next person then. I think Martin Garrett is not attending, but I think Gavin Smith. Is Gavin here? So you're going to read out for...
I'm not going to read it out, actually. I'm going to give a summary. I speak for the Transport for Greater Bristol. What Bristol needs is a vision for transport. That's what it needs, and basically it hasn't really got one yet. We're arguing that we must keep the mass transit budget because it's essential. If we're actually serious about trying to alter modal split, get people out of their cars, reduce congestion and reduce air quality, improve air quality, unless we have mass transit, it won't happen. It's as simple as that. So keep the budget. What I'm afraid we disagree, we completely disagree with the idea of the underground because it's incredibly expensive. The suggestion was 10 times as expensive. I had no idea. It might only be 5 times as expensive. The other cities have trams, surface trams. I'll just list them for you. Birmingham, Manchester, Sheffield, Nottingham, Edinburgh, Dublin, just going a bit further afield, and soon Cardiff, integrated with its rail system, which is bloody good, and Coventry is looking at very light tram. So these cities, they know what they're doing. They're getting government grants for this. They are getting oodles of money. They're extending their lines. And Bristol really needs to get on this boat. You know, we haven't done, we should do. Bath is actually also talking about trams, I should tell you. So we think the money, the vast amount of money, the millions of quid being suggested, needs in part to go to consultants because we don't have the expertise here. Consultants who've actually been involved in running tram systems. Speak to the people who just did Dublin, they'd be quite good. So that's where it needs to go initially. Specific suggestions, Toby might like this one. It's pretty obvious when you look at a map that 2 places that need initially a bus maybe, park and ride certainly, but eventually a tram system, are the Avon Ring Road, connecting all those car-based destinations around there, and the other one's the M32, which needs to be demotorised. Highways England would be very happy with that because they're quite happy to shed the M32. The overhead viaducts are all beginning to be time expired. If somebody's got to pay for them to be repaired, the quick way of doing it is to knock them down, and at the same time as having a tram system down there, you return it to surface working, surface crossings, parallel tramway, parallel cycleway, etc. So, sorry, I'm not that good at public speaking. So that's what we need. We need that sort of vision for Bristol. We haven't got it yet. It needs to be integrated with transport, Travel West. You know, when Bristol region sees Portishead and the Henbury line start, the penny will drop. They'll think, oh yeah, mass transit is the way to go. So it might take 5 years for the consciousness to raise, but in the meantime, do a bit of planning and spend this budget usefully.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. You spoke very well, by the way. Yes. Is David Andrews here, please? David? Okay. No, David? Right. Angela Arden is not coming, I think, in case Angela's turned up unexpectedly. Okay. Damien Valentine and Clive Turner. Are David and Clive here? No? Okay, if you decide you're here and haven't said now, you can come in later. Christina Biggs. Is Christina here? Hello, Christina. Nice to see you again.
I'm here speaking on behalf of Friends of Suburban Bristol Railways. So we're delighted that the Metro West Phase 1A is now happening, and we've had lots of nice comments. We've seen ridership go up, and we're very relieved that the development consent order for Porter's Head been granted, and that Phase 2 is you've topped up the funding. So we're very grateful for that. So in terms of vision, we see the rail network as a spine. So it doesn't go everywhere, but there's huge potential for linking buses initially into the train system. But I lived in Grenoble for several years. The trains can't go into the centre. You have the train to get you to Grenoble, then there's a bus network, and they have trams. Trams are the best for the city centre because what they're doing, it's a guided way, so people can't, so it's much less accidents because you know where the tram's going to be. And what you do is you have trade coming in early in the morning, you have a cut-off, you've got bollards, and then the rest of the time it's just trams and foot. And it worked wonderfully, certainly in Grenoble and Stockholm. Makes it quiet. And the essential thing is what we call road space removal. You've got to take away space from the cars, but give them something that's really rapid. Underground may be necessary in some places, but the idea is to squeeze out cars and make something, a transit system that's really convenient, frequent, regular, and that should sort Bristol out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Is Jevon Smith here, if I've said the name right?
I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Smith.
Okay, Robbie. Thank you for that.
Yes, further to what Jevon has already actually said in previous public meetings, I think it's very important to understand and the area we're actually in here. We're right down the way from a major industrial employer here, GKN and British Aerospace, are literally right up this road here, right at the far end of this field. Okay, and I think this actually gives us a very, very important point that we need to actually make, because the people who are being disconnected are our engineers. Okay, and we've got a lot of them, and some very good ones in this region, as well as excellent universities and excellent provision for further and higher education, as well as the technical education that a lot of these people rely on in their day jobs. I think it's incredibly short-sighted that we're not actually thinking more about the blue-collar guy who is actually producing our trams, our trains, and our buses in this region, by taking those very services that they would otherwise be travelling on to get to work, to build those damn things, so that we could all actually use them and benefit from them, regardless of what industry we actually work in. Okay, we're all reliant on these people, and forgetting them by taking bus services off is just not the way to do things, and it's not the way major cities around the world do things. It's not even the way we do things in this country, quite frankly. We saw yesterday in the budget announcements, including money which is going to Andy Street up in the West Midlands for further development of the tram sector, which is a brand new sector which has only been operating in the West Midlands for the last 15 years. And we need to actually start thinking about what it is we want to be having in 5, in 10, and in 15 years' time. And we need to actually start doing this now. We also do need, as Gavin said, Ed on behalf of Martin and TFDB, we do also need to be sure that we're getting these messages right, that we want to actually make the car secondary for people to use, as is the case with Sadiq in London and Andy in Greater Manchester, and even Tracy Brabin in West Yorkshire is saying a lot of the same thing as those two guys now are. And thank you, Tim. We need to be getting this done, and we need to do this now, because if we don't, this boat is going to sail and we're not going to be on it.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay. Excuse me. Is Ian Downey here, please? Ian. Hello, Ian. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
When you're ready, thank you.
Thanks. In the same vein as previously, I'd like to offer you a summarised transcript. I'm speaking in a personal capacity, but as one of a number of bus users in the Chew Valley. On 18th of January 2023, Wecker and Baines announced planned cuts from April this year to all bus services that serve the Chew Valley. This includes the 672, a long-standing fixed route used by many in their daily life. Now, some 2 months further on, we are still without proper clarity on what the plans are to replace these services just weeks away. The planned withdrawal of these buses so abruptly with inadequate consultation or explanation seriously undermines people's trust in the DRT offer and diminishes the potential success of DRT in our area. People are bemused and sceptical at the prospect. The frequency of the 672 bus has been cut back before and now provides only the most basic service, but one that is relied on by many travellers for a wide variety of journeys. It provides a convenient, timetabled point-to-point service. As my only public transport route to Bristol from the Chew Valley, I use it regularly to get to work. Indeed, one reason I recently changed job to work in Bristol was the access to a regular local bus service, and I work for a company with a very active travel policy. Many fellow passengers are also regular users. Over the last 12 to 18 months, an increasing number of travellers are realising this advantage. I have concluded, however, that without the 672, I will have no other option than to revert to using a car for this and other journeys. The West of England Future Transport Zone programme speaks of user-centred design and putting passengers in control. In my view, the level of awareness raising and passenger engagement to date has been lacking, if not invisible. This is a key weakness in promoting transition to a disruptive, experimental alternative. There isn't even any information posted at the bus stops currently. News of the cuts and proposed DRT appearing in the press as an apparent fait accompli does not come across well. This is not the best way to engender support, and other technical concerns around journey time and route planning, ticketing and zoning arrangements also need addressed. In the absence of a more meaningful engagement to date, I'm not persuaded that the proposed new services are currently credible. They do not offer a compelling equivalent service or an improvement on what is currently available. This is counterintuitive when improvement is a key tenet of the BSIP. I note that WECA's own audit committee has also identified a paucity of information to evaluate, and consequently a high risk and uncertainty in the planning of the proposed DRT alternative. In short, more and better evidence is therefore necessary before proceeding. I understand there is some extended support for the 672 from Baines until the end of July 2023, which is welcome. A great deal of passenger expectation rests on trust and predictability. In the case of the 672, the status quo does actually work as a reliable, fixed, timetable, spinal route. Maintaining or increasing the service would provide a more credible justification and transition pathway for wider DRT proposals. These services are crucial in connecting isolated communities and persuading drivers to use public transport instead. I expect concerted endeavour from WECA and Baines on a more flexible approach and to securing government support to deploy some of the significant resources available to WECA to pre-existing supported bus services under the threat, as well as to complementary innovations that are proposed. I urge WECA and Baines to reconsider this decision, the implementation approach and timetable. I anticipate more and better information plus good news on the continuity of these vital services for outlying districts beyond April 23. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ian. Now, I understand David Redgewell is going to speak. You are there, David, on behalf of Councillor Liz Hardman. Is that right? Correct. Yeah, thank you, David.
A few weeks ago, I went down to Radstock and Midsummer Norton and Poulton to meet Liz and understand the problems. And the issue is, it's an area of social deprivation and social exclusion. Radstock and Midsummer Norton, Poulton, some of the poorer parts of our communities. Once again, they're going to lose their bus service. I went out on the local town service and went round the town on the 82 and had a discussion with the driver. We also had the protest in Bath, where the driver brought all the residents and users of the service. I then went and met the children that went to school, and they were told there was going to be a DRT, and the headmaster just threw his hands up with horror and said, but I've got 30, 40 children here, and a 16-seater DRT is never going to carry the children in June, so I believe Richard's extended the contract to July to make sure that we can keep the children going to school. But this is not a way to run a bus service, Mr. Mayor. Buses need to have planning 5-year contracts set by the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority and money from BSIP or money from the Transport Levy. We don't have a precept. So we're relying on those levies, which are in the Act of Parliament from Bristol City Council, South Gloucestershire and Baines, with some funny coming from North Somerset. We've also got the 179, which is a vital link from Poulton and Radstock up again through another poor area of the area into Baines. The 179 goes through Timsbury. That's their link into Bath every day to go to work. I met the residents on that bus. They're horrified they'll have no bus in June. These are main lines. And as was pointed out by the Mayor, never to be replaced by Westlink. They were meant to be complementary to Westlink. And then I read in the national newspapers that Baines is removing the services so Westlink can bed in. Incorrect. Lots of nonsense. These services are main lines, will never be replaced by Westlink. And then yesterday I was on a call. As everybody knows, I'm one of the transport people on the Somerset Bus Advisory Board and work with the DFT and with Councillor Mike Rigby, who's an excellent councillor to work with. And so we've now worried about the 172, which is the evening service. That goes out after 7 o'clock, Mayor. No Westlinks around. And that goes through Peasdown, St John, Radstock, Midsummer Norton, Westfield, Poulton, and then to the City of Wales. Some in the day will go to Bristol with some bits of higher frequency. Got to be careful. Yeah, got to be careful on all the higher frequencies. They're only in the day, as I've found out talking to the NHS. They're not in the evenings. They're not Sundays. So therefore, we're putting the services back at £11 million to where they were in pre-COVID, which is fine. I welcome that money, Dan. You know I do. But it's got to be not all the time. We've got a universal service. So we've got to really, really help the communities in the Chew Valley and the area around Radstock, Midsummer Norton, and Peasdown St John. They cannot lose their bus services. They're the workforce of Bath, the nighttime economy, and they make the city tick. We've got to have a meeting between Baines and Wecker and the other, and Bristol and South Gloucestershire and North Somerset to work out how we keep these bus services going. And if that has to be out after, as soon as the local elections are out of the way, that needs to happen urgently. And I hope the directors and the chief executive will make sure that happens, because we cannot go on with a bus crisis like this. And just final points on this. Today we're going to talk about climate change. The biggest emission is the private car. And if we're going to put people in the private car, some of those people can't even afford the bus fares in Radstock, Midsummer Norton. This is totally an unacceptable policy for a city region. And Liz is extremely concerned. She's been a bus campaigner in Bath and South Bath for years. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for speaking on behalf of Liz. Now, I understand Councillor Ed Plowden was due to speak, but David Wilcox is going to speak for him. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The Combined Authorities Commissioned report from Solace outlines a long list of fundamental weaknesses, including a lack of clarity about core purpose, a lack of required strategies, no significant organisational development plan or operating principles, leadership problems, a need to update its constitution, and a need to support to address these problems. However, it appears, despite warm words, there is a level of denial about the problems, and that the Audit Committee has roundly dismissed the attempts to implement a convincing plan as demonstrating little, if any, progress, and appearing to be more than an attempt to placate auditors and scrutiny. There is one ray of hope. It appears that my question to the Metro Mayor about the franchising is at least flushed out. There is now a consensus that bus franchising should at least be studied as an essential first step towards the actual franchising. This is not a quick fix, and that is exactly why we need to start now. I urge the four leaders to agree to progress this with urgency and to ensure that it considers options for precepting powers to be granted as part of this package. Hence, we would have some hope of addressing our broken commercial model. Instead, there is a proposal in the paperwork to spend yet more money investigating a mass transit system. This is despite the fact that the existing reports have not been made public. Rather, that the only thing that has been made public is clear differences of opinion and the interpretation by the Bristol Mayor and the Metro Mayor as to the merits of different options and wildly different associated costs. Before committing another £13.6 million of public money as part of the Future 4 West project, the existing reports desperately need to be made public so that this further proposed allocation of public funds and the scope of the work can be given full public scrutiny. How can the public be expected to get behind a vision for the future transport without being able to see whether the options being taken forward are realistic or not?
Thank you very much, David, on speaking on behalf of Ed. Matt Griffith is going to speak on behalf of Business West. Matt, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just read out our statement. Business West is for business leadership organisation and Chamber of Commerce for the West of England area. Transport has long been a priority issue for our members. In successive surveys we have conducted, transport is always identified as one of our key regional weaknesses and the issue that businesses want to see properly addressed and delivered on with high ambition. It matters on a range of critical ingredients for our economic prosperity and the future plans of our businesses. Our weakness in transport is also a serious obstacle to delivering for our worse off citizens, particularly the failure to connect the poorer parts of our region to jobs and opportunities. A failure to deliver our full ambitions on transport would also hurt delivering net zero and viable non-car options. Our region has underinvested for decades in transport and transport infrastructure. One of the reasons for this has been a historic failure to properly understand and articulate our future case for investment to central government. The past few years under Metro Mayors have been a success, and our recent high levels of funding allocations from central government have been a tribute to our ability to work together. But success has to be planned for in advance, and we must now do the work that sets out the next stage of our ambitions. If we do not, the risk is that we fail to build the pipeline of future transport projects, and the gaps between our needs and our level of investment remains unfulfilled. It is notable that the competition on transport, particularly from English cities, is now intensifying. Look at the recent mass transit plans from Tracy Brabin in West Yorkshire, or the latest transport devolution settlement from Greater Manchester in the budget. One of the key lessons for successful city regions is that transport is a decades-long process, grounded in a long-term vision, planning, and in significant investment in evidence and institutional capacity. One of the reasons for the success of both London and Manchester is that they have the transport evidence and knowledge to be able to persuade and argue with the Department of Transport on the merits of their case. The West of England Combined Authority offers the ability to ambitiously plan and deliver our region's transport needs. Although the funding of this will inevitably be in part opportunistic, taking advantage of those opportunities can only happen if the evidence and costings for different levels of ambition exist. Having a well-evidenced and ambitious set of transport asks should form the backbone of our future ambitions of devolution. This is why we strongly support the investment now in studies that properly understand the options for future large-scale transport investment, including mass transit, and urge the committee members to vote in favour of this.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, Councillor Emma Edwards. Is Councillor Emma Edwards here, please? Hello, Emma.
Hello.
Nice
Thank
to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm going to send you an email following an introduction I've been given. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Thank
I'll
you.
do that. Okay.
I'm not going to read out my statement because it was quite long, so I've just done a bit of a summary here. So we do understand that there is a need for mass transit. I think there might be a bit of miscommunication that the Green Party don't. We do. And that is going to be ambitious and it's going to need investment and will bring with it many challenges. And last year we brought a motion to full council asking for a study to look at those challenges and compare the best options for mass transit, and we look forward to seeing the results of that. With our understanding of climate change and the specific issues that the climate change would bring to Bristol as a low-lying city in a coastal area with many underground anomalies and a complex road system, as Greens we cannot believe that the best option would involve tunnelling or an underground. Therefore, we request that attention is moved away from this underground debate that is playing out in the press and instead look at the mass transit that can be implemented fastest with the least environmental impact, with a sensible budget that would serve the most people in the city, even if that would mean repurposing some road space. And I would also request that we look at workplace parking levies. If we had introduced workplace parking levies in 2011, we would have raised £100 million. I know earlier somebody talked about Nottingham. They did this in Nottingham and ring-fenced that to extend their tram system, and they've got a fantastic tram system now. That's what we could have had. That's what we can have. So we look forward to seeing those reports, and just to say that the Green Party would support an above-ground mass transit system such as trams that could be implemented in such a way. And in the meantime, and until those studies have confirmed that we still ask that the main focus is sorting out this current issue with buses. We've heard lots of people talk about buses today, and also prioritising improving Bristol's active travel infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Edwin, and I don't know how you say your family name. Is it Fasia?
He's not here.
He's not here. So how do we say his family name, out of curiosity?
You said it.
I said it. Okay, that was lucky then. All right.
English is not his first language, but I thank the officers for allowing the report to go in, because it was difficult. It's now been found out to get people from BME community instruction. communicate. They want to make sure that their bus service 47 was understood as being cut. Really, really worried they are in St Paul's, Albury Court, and the areas where they will have no public transport, saving centres, and that's refugees and people of least able to cope without public transport. So that's why we want to. So can I just thank the officers for allowing that report to go forward and making sure that the Viennese community and the Archbishops were actually had a voice in this meeting today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David, for explaining that and for making those important points. Okay, well, thank you to everybody who's contributed a statement and spoken today. All comments have been noted, and where they relate to agenda items will be taken into account by the committee today. Okay, the next item is item 7, and that's comments from the chair of the Local Enterprise Partnership Board, and that's Richard Bonner. Richard's been travelling, I know, I don't think you walked, you must have flown, to get to us today, so thank you for doing that. Richard, over to you.
Thank you. Of course, sorry. Thank you, Dan. And indeed, actually, I wanted to just share a few reflections on where I've been this week. So I've been to MIPIM, which is an international real estate investment forum, where we led a delegation on behalf of Bristol and Bath. And actually, we had some really superb meetings and some engagements and presented the region around a whole host of opportunities. I was particularly pleased to follow up with your recent meeting, Mayor, with the Minister, Lord Johnson, and we celebrated many of the significant investments that we have in some of our technologies. So hydrogen, the work that we're doing through Hydrogen Southwest, the assets that we have with DETI and IAPS were particularly of interest to the Minister. We were particularly keen to think about how we continue to leverage the investment that we've made in QTIC, the Quantum Technology Innovation Centre, and that is something that will be at the heart of the government's industrial plans and strategy. I was also very interested to engage with the Office for Investment. They continue to recognise the opportunities that are presented here in the west of England for inbound investment, and we were particularly pleased to celebrate and present on Temple Quarter in the aftermath of the government's investment and the fact that we are soon to be presenting to the market the opportunities to continue to bring the investment for housing and for industrial and economic opportunity. And that was very well received by the market and potential investors whilst we were there. I think I was also really heartened to have a panel discussion on our stand with the Liverpool City Region Mayor, Steve Rotherham, and our fellow partners at Western Gateway, Councillor Jane Mudd, the Vice Chair. And we were talking about the opportunities for energy from the Severn Estuary, and I think it would be really good for us to continue to think about how we work together with our partners in Liverpool to create a world-class opportunity to harness energy from the Severn and from the Mersey, and I was really pleased that our partners are open for that collaboration. And then I would just move on to one or two other reflections on the papers today. It is pleased to see that in our climate and ecological strategy and action plan that we are making progress. It was recognised actually whilst I was away this week, the opportunities that we receive from the Green Recovery Fund, and I'm pleased to see that we would like to add to that fund. I think it's something that we can be very proud of, and it's really good to see the progress that is being made in terms of impact and opportunities for businesses and citizens to participate in that fund. With regards to the investment fund, I think we've heard a lot today about the passions for getting a strategy for our transport infrastructure. That again was a very unifying voice and point of view across all of the city regions actually, and we were talking a lot about that this week. So to continue to build a strategy, to continue to build the evidence base and to continue to set out our long-term investment strategy is critical, but I also recognise that there are a whole significant series of further investments and impacts across the city region that continue to deliver a whole raft of interventions that are very positive for us in the city region. Pleased to see that we have a delivery assurance framework and that the committee is being supported with a programme board. I think it's important that we continue to not just hold ourselves to account, but we also see that we can test and check the programmes as they move forwards. And of course, we're in a turbulent economy and a turbulent time at the moment, so being able to be fleet of foot and agile in making investment decisions and to change when things are not necessarily quite working so that we can retain all of the funds that we receive is really, really important. I would just like to reflect on the audit report, the Solace report, and recognise that we agreed in December at the committee that there would be an action plan in the aftermath of the Grant Thornton report. I was very pleased to be interviewed by the representative from Solace, and he recognises the value that we can place in having a strong business voice as part of our combined authority, and we continue to seek to accelerate the involvement and the ability to shape things like an economic strategy with the evidence base that allows us to build our plans for investment behind that. So I think that's all I've got to say today, but thank you.
That's great, Richard. Thank you very much indeed for that, and good to see you back. Okay. All right, the next item is item 8. That's comments from the West of England Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Comments from the Authority's Overview and Scrutiny Committee have been circulated in advance to the committee and published on the West of England website. Therefore, can I please ask Councillor Winston Dogood, who's here today to my left, to, the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to present comments on behalf of his committee. Thank you, Winston.
Chair, I wonder if I could just request if we change the batting order. I was going to have a quiet word with you before the meeting. I think it would help you, just the flow from leading on from what the Chair of the LEP has just said about Solace, that Jeff and I, Chair of Scrutiny, Audit here, have combined on the Solace thing, and Jeff is going to lead on Solace. So if I could request I come after Jeff, I think that would help you in the running of the meeting.
Okay, over to you. Jeff, welcome to you.
Thank you, Dan.
So off you go, and then Winston will come in afterwards. Thank you very much.
My statement falls into 3 parts. 2 parts relate to comments circulated within the papers for this meeting relating to the Transport Risk Register and the VFM Action Plan. These were approved by members of Audit Committee, so they're cross-party, cross-authority boundaries from elected members who I emphasise are very concerned. The final part of my report are comments on the Solace report. This hasn't been discussed in Audit Committee, so represents my personal views moderated to reflect the consensus I believe would be expressed at a meeting. What, however, I was going to ask is your indulgence to the committee that possibly those comments I might defer until James Taylor is with us, because as they relate to his report, I think that would be helpful, but that's obviously in the hands of the committee of whether you're prepared to let me speak at the start of that item on the agenda.
Okay, I will do it, Jeff, because I think it's probably the right thing to do. But you're speaking first, then want to wait to someone to come to speak later. Let's go with you, but I ask you to be as concise as you can when you make your comments, please, if that's okay.
Indeed. So if we deal with the VFM report, and I preface these remarks by emphasising that all members want WECA to succeed and recognise how important its role is, which is why we want it to work effectively. So these aren't comments from people who want to disrupt, these are comments from people who want it to succeed. In December, we were told that the leaders were planning a meeting in January to deal with co-working issues and establish how they could improve their working. That meeting, we understand, eventually took place in late February for 1 hour. That's not enough. And we need a sign that committee is taking this seriously. We welcome the terms of reference to the Solace Peer Challenge, but we note that those issues were those identified by audit and scrutiny meetings over a year ago, and Winston and I wrote to the committee then, raising those issues, so there's nothing new. We hope that each member of the committee can commit to working together to resolve differences in advance of public meetings, so that any amendments to papers can be agreed and published in such a way that members of the public and members of the councils who are actually trying to participate can understand what has changed from the originally produced papers. I move on to the bus transport and infrastructure risk register. Now, this was a report the Audit Committee asked to see because we recognised it was a significant issue. And I'm trying to confine my remarks to worries about risks and not trying to take sides in this issue, but there were real concerns raised. The risks relating to the withdrawal of support for bus services from some of our most deprived areas, we felt did not identify the seriousness of the situation. Similarly, the risks around demand transport do not appear to have fully recognised the extent of the potential commercial and economic risk or the social impact. The procurement process appears not to have identified the potential challenges. The related risks seem massive, and the decisions may have significant unmeasured risk to the authority. Audit Committee was not convinced that officers were fully aware of the magnitude of the risk, and the committee may not have been informed of this when the decisions were taken. It's a real concern that the risks are written in diplomatic officer language. If the residents of the areas we've heard about in public forum and that all members of councils have communication with, read those risk registers, they would not understand or recognise the risks that they see affect their daily lives. And we have to make an effort to ensure that risk registers identify those real risks for our residents. Those are the two items I have down. The third item in relation to the Solis report, I will come back to later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Okay, over to you, Winston. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've got a comprehensive statement today, deliberately more minute-like. It was a good session. Yet again, thanks very much for your attendance. And actually, you had an hour and 10 minutes with us on question and answers rather than the usual 40. And we really were very grateful for that. There was a lot to read and go through and digest, but we concentrated on three issues: the buses, Solis, and climate and ecological strategy. I think we've heard a lot about the buses this morning, this afternoon rather. I really would urge the committee and Mayor yourself to really look at a bit more of the detail that we've actually put in the report and the statement of how the transport levy is broken down. So we've got an amalgam of all the numbers there, and you'll know in your unitary authorities how much that transport levy relates and the summation of those parts. So in all, it's 22 million, just over 22 million this year. And if you look at supported bus services, you'll find that it's jumped from a budgeted 3 million up to 9.3 million. And there were exceptional circumstances during the year. That 9.3 million, and I'm grateful to Alistair and his team, will actually net down to 7 million after Section 106 and bus operator grants and income are taken off. But it's a sizable amount. I mean, it's triple what we've done in the past. And I think that needs to be examined. We don't know yet what this is going to be this coming year. But there's an awful lot more money going into bus support than there was because we know the bus inflation, for want of a better expression. I know that South Gloucestershire, in addition to the transport levy, have put in another 435k, which is 11% up on their total transport levy. And I know that Baines now have put in an extra, I think the figure is 346k, which is overall 6.6% up on the levy. So there's a lot of money going in there. And then in addition, of course, thank goodness, we've got the BSIP money, which starts in April, which is 52 million over 2 years. Presumably it's not hockey sticked. It's going to be 26 million roughly 1 year and 26 million. So there is a lot of money available for supported bus services. And I think where I would request the members of the committee and yourself to really home in on these details about the extra money that is available and the extra expenditure that's necessary because of bus inflation, and how we're accounting for those in existing supported bus services, some of which have now been cut, and then also what we do with the BSIP money. I have to just say, and David Redgewell has been my major source, but I've also reached out to Somerset County Council. There does seem to be a different attitude, a different modus operandi of how Somerset are going about this issue of BSIP and what they've got on supported bus services. There seems to be more of a collaborative effect with the bus companies, the councillors and the senior officers, and they seem to be more successful in coming out with solutions that hit the triple bottom line of economic, social and environmental impact. So that's all I would request, that Unitary Authority leaders really look at this detail, and the four of you in particular are really up to speed of what the dramatic change that's happened in the last year, quite often beyond our circumstances. On climate and ecological update and the strategy, we really welcomed the paper and the amount of work that had gone into it. The fact is, if you look at that and the trajectory of where we need to be, because all three unitary authorities, plus North Somerset, plus the West of England Combined Authority, have gone for Agenda 2030, not 2050, which is the UK target. And we're way off the trajectory. We're making progress, but we're way off the trajectory of where we need to be. And the budget this week was not encouraging from what central government are going to put in. They need to be a lot more active, and frankly, that's not open for discussion, it's fact. And it was really disappointing. I think the most constructive remarks I can make is, from the committee, is that we clearly need now, at this stage, 2023, going forward, a separate climate and ecological board, in addition to the transport board, in addition to the skills and business board. And we need to think carefully about the membership and the chairmanship of that board, and in a thoughtful way which could be most helpful in making decisions, but also scrutinising various areas of expertise. And in fact, we've arranged a separate task and finish group in the Scrutiny Committee to be held in the next 2 or 3 weeks about how we need to recalibrate scrutiny going forward, because as I mentioned in last month's meeting, or January's meeting, that the nature of the West of England Combined Authority, not just the growth, but the fact that you've got to go for tranche 2, tranche 3 money from central government, but also concentrate on delivery in such a short period of time, means the very nature and therefore the culture of the West of England Combined Authority has to change quite dramatically in the changed circumstances. And then finally, I'll go ahead and say my bit about Solace, and if Jeff is hanging back for Jim to arrive. But my remarks are more supportive. We did spend a lot of the meeting talking about the Solace report. So if it's acknowledged that I'm minimalising what I'm going to say so I don't duplicate what Jeff is going to say. I think the comment I would make is, it's all fixable. It is all fixable. This is a first-class piece of work. I'm astonished how quickly Jim has picked up all the issues, and I'm really pleased, and we're really pleased, I shouldn't personalise it, the committee are, with the action plan. I think it's really important now that it happens. There isn't a choice. The letter from the Minister is quite clear. We're on warning, and if we don't see we're on warning, then we better wake up and smell the coffee. So I really hope, and Jeff will speak more about this, that we make quick progress in this and meet the deadline. And I was particularly pleased, Metro Mayor, when you were answering your questions in front of us, that you realised a lot of the issues, and you hopefully see a positive way forward. You even acknowledged at one point that, yes, the Constitution could be improved, which is actually a shift of position. That's a compliment to you in terms of what you've inherited in 2021 from what was set up in 2017. I think the most, you could say damning, but the most interesting part of Solace was there has been no real discussion about what the purpose is of the West of England Combined Authority since it was set up in 2016, 2017. And that's a really positive thing in a way, in that it's a chance to recalibrate and reinvigorate what our purpose is. It's not just about getting 900 million over 30 years, it's become a lot more than that. And as we know from other Metro Combined Authorities, who have made that, they're further on the journey. It is, as I used an expression before, a dog-eat-dog environment. We're competing with other authorities for funds, and we aren't fit for purpose at the moment, and this report gives us the opportunity for being fit for purpose. So, Metro Mayor, thank you for your indulgence. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Winston. Richard, do you want to comment on some of the points that Winston made, reference resources for buses, please?
Apologies. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so yeah, it's fair to say, yeah, we've had to spend, and it's probably something in the region of circa 7 million more on supported bus services. The way we funded, and a lot of that is due to the increasing costs of it. You know, the bus inflation is very significant, as we know. It's far in excess of sort of some of the headline inflations that we'll have seen in CPI, and the sorts of numbers being touted about or tend to be in the 40 plus %, so 42, 47, those are the sorts of numbers that we're talking about. So the costs have really increased for reasons which I think we all know, both in terms of labour, fuel, and all sorts of other related increases. The way we've managed to fund that as a combined authority, in terms of the budget, is we have had an underspend in concessionary fares, really, and that is effectively less people using public transport who are of the age 60 plus, I guess, or whatever it is, to use those buses in the main. So concessionary fares has been an underspend of something like circa 3-4 million. And the other half of the funding has come really about some additional reserves money that we put in from the reserve that's held within that transport side to deal with sort of fluctuations, because companies, for example, go bust in this arena more regularly than we would like to see, really. And the reserve is built up to be perfectly straight from the funding that's provided by the unitary authority. So it's a reserve that's held on the balance sheet of the West of England Combined Authority, but that's where that money comes from. So circa 3 million is from that reserve, and an additional grant that government continued, where we weren't expecting that continuation. So that's where the split. So we spent circa 7 million more, largely due to the extension we had to do on the contract that ended last summer for this period to take us through, really. And the prices were significantly more than we paid, and that's effectively how the sort of financial arrangement worked, really. And it's important to recognise on concessionary fares that they are still somewhere in the sort of 60% of recovery, and that's that's a challenge for us, really, around driving up that usage, both in terms of economic impact and in terms of well-being as well, for people to get out. So it's important for the sort of financial reasons. There's bigger economic and there's bigger well-being reasons on that we're really alive to as well.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that. Okay, now, Winston, I am aware that you are not standing as a councillor again, therefore you will not be here again, which is sad, and I've enjoyed working with you. I want to thank you for all your effort, which I know has been considerable, and your colleagues as well. What can I say? I've liked working with you. I don't necessarily like you redefining what I'm saying about the various things, but on today I'll forgive you. This is your last day. Thank you again, sincerely, for what you've done, because I think what you've done has helped me think and be a better mayor. I hope you've challenged the leaders too, so that they can make better decisions, because at the end of the day that's what we need to do, because that's what delivery comes from, better decision making. Okay, thank you very much. Now I can see that Jim Taylor from Solace has arrived. Jim, I'm going to let you sort of sit and rest, but you need to be in listening mode, because the chair of the Audit Committee wants to say something that he wants you to hear, and we've rearranged the order of business in order that we could wait for your arrival. Have you been at Cheltenham? Is the rumour true? Did you win? I'm trying to look at your face to see if I can tell. Oh, well, perhaps that's just as well, because you're going to have to listen now for a bit. So, Jeff, over to you as promised.
Thank you, Dan. I welcome this Solace report, shocking though it is to read the failings set out so coherently and professionally. Jim is to be congratulated in highlighting so much so quickly, and I welcome the change in direction our interim chief executive has made in taking on board the need to change. Now, my first draft response was going through section by section, and I realised that I was endorsing each item and then explaining when either Winston or I had previously raised them, and I thought that really that didn't add to the benefit of the process, so I dropped that idea. But I do really want to not underestimate, the anger and frustration amongst backbenchers of all authorities. Until now, it's felt very much as though the combined authority was playing for time while carrying on without changing. You could carry on doing that now, claiming we're entering the pre-election period and no decisions can be taken until you reconvene in June. But that would be a disastrous missed opportunity. Alternatively, with so many challenges outlined in the report, there's a danger that we attempt to make progress on all fronts at the same time, which could well result in little or no progress at all. So let me set out what I'd like to see, and I realise this is presumptuous, but I know I won't get the chance to take part in the debate later, so this is my chance to do so. In addition to a wholehearted endorsement, I'd first of all urge you, on page 11, it outlines some possible principles. I'd love to hear each member of the committee in turn confirm that they accept and will work within those 5 principles. Now that has to be your individual decision to make this organisation work and to collectively resolve decisions by working together. But please, please agree to work together to resolve differences before public meetings. Now, it seems to me we're all in this together, need advice on priorities and an urgent assessment of capacity to respond to the challenges that have been set. We must recognise that we have hard-pressed staff coping with all that they have to do. So we must ensure the challenges are not unreasonable. So we need to plan for any additional resources. We cannot afford to move slowly. My suggestion is that you ask Solace to advise on prioritising the work. And going through that list, I could find justification for making each item that's listed the top priority. I realise that doesn't help you. But we need our independent expert, Jim, to help determine those priorities and work out the order in which we approach them. Thirdly, we need to identify what actions can be dealt with in-house and delegate authority to the chief exec and the LA chief execs or their nominees to resolve those issues with detailed papers and updates ready to present after the election, with all papers co-worked and agreed before the annual meeting. We need to resolve what work cannot be done in-house, establish specifications for staff or consultants to fill those roles, delegate the filling of those roles to chief execs so that they can also be actioned as quickly as possible. Now, I don't mind if you choose to do something completely different to all that I've outlined. All I ask is that you set in hand the ability to maximise the outcomes over the next 3 months while 2 of our 3 constituent authorities are focused on elections. Mayor, committee, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And Jeff, thank you for the work of you and the hard, put a lot of long hours into this, haven't you, over many a month and many a year, and no doubt before I was the mayor too. So thank you for that, and to your team and colleagues. Really appreciate that. I don't know whether you're going to be here again, but if you are, I look forward to that. And if you're doing other interesting things, all the best with them.
I'm not up for election this time.
Well, in that case, okay. Okay, so Hopefully you are then. Okay, that's great. Thank you very, very much indeed. Okay, Jim, you heard that? Great, thank you, Jim. We were waiting for you, so we want to make sure you did hear it in the event. Okay. Well, look, can I just say, look, I understand, Jeff, that there's been some timing issues, meaning your audit committee, I think, met at a time that was after Jim's report came out, because we were moving apace. I think I'm right in saying there was some kind of lining up issue.
Yeah, we had the action plan, but we met with a non-updated action plan, but before Jim's report came out, and that came out just afterwards. So tones changed, which is why I've dropped out some of the comments and tried to concentrate on the positive actions, if you like. Okay. Well, I hope you see from the fact that Jim moved so quickly. I asked Solis to be involved. They got involved. They moved very quickly. I hope you see that as a very encouraging sign. Very encouraging. I don't want it to be taken as negative, but I do want to make sure we've conveyed to you how serious we see it as being, and hope that can be taken on board and why decisions have got to be taken today, because otherwise, if we don't make decisions to delegate today, we might lose the next 3 months when we're in a sort of a slight, the committee's in a sort of interregnum situation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, we're now going to move to the report before us today. So item 10 is the Climate and Ecological Strategy and Action Plan for 2023. And as the sort of heart of this meeting is tackling the climate and ecological emergency, this is obviously very appropriate. And this is clearly, I think most of us would agree, the biggest challenge we face as a region, as a nation and as a planet. And we've heard many comments from the public and others today that reinforce that position and view. Okay, I'm very proud of the success of the West of England Green Recovery Fund. We're investing in things like planting trees, creating green jobs, and supporting pollinator projects to make sure our region is the UK's bee and pollinator capital in the future. And this, I have to say, is somewhat in contrast to Wednesday's budget, which was without any hint of focus on home installation, something that we plan to expand by the way of the West of England's retrofit programme. I'm also pleased that the Green Recovery Fund has brought in £16 million in match funding, something that we always intended that this would do. It wasn't just going to be that we would fund these important things, we were going to get others to contribute to make a difference for our region, and that has happened. And as Richard Bonner mentioned, that is why we're looking to expand it now so we can lever in even more in the future. So what we are therefore looking today is for committee members to be given the opportunity to support increasing the Green Recovery Fund by £10 million in the following votes. So therefore, I start by moving the recommendation set out in the report. Is there a seconder for that, please? Thank you very much, Toby. Would you like to speak now or later to this?
Thank you, Chair. I've got comments on each recommendation, so I'm happy to speak as we work our way through.
Okay, let's do that then as we work our way through then. Do any other members wish to speak on this item, please? No? Okay, at the moment, Toby?
I'll have a...
I'm sorry, Marvin.
Yeah, I'm not Toby. I look very different.
No, I know. I realise that.
Well, but I'll make some comment if we can on the on street charging as well, when that item comes up.
Okay, well in that case, the recommendations, there are several, so I'll go through each recommendation and I'll invite you all to speak as you see fit. Okay? So the first recommendation is to note progress on the Climate and Ecological Strategy and Action Plan 2022, actions as set out in Appendix 2. Okay, who would like to speak on that one? Toby? Thank you.
Chair, thank you. And I'm pleased to see the progress as set out in this report. We understand that the climate emergency is a shared regional, national and global priority, and we support the focus that this document brings to the West of England. I'm pleased to see the progression from last year's plan. So if I can talk specifically about two projects within South Gloucestershire that have regional significance. Firstly, the tree canopy project. That will see the planting of a further 2,000 trees that will commence shortly across South Gloucestershire, and that will complement the council's own tree planting programme, and together they will help us to sequester carbon, provide shading, support nature's recovery and help to keep areas cooler during future extreme heat events and to create more livable places. The second initiative I'd like to make some comments on is around the Froome Valley River Reserve. So I'm pleased to report that engagement has started with the landowners and tenants to be able to establish the potential boundary of this new river reserve, and in parallel discussions are underway regarding delivery arrangements and long-term maintenance and management options, and it has the potential to provide a major boost to nature's recovery and to public engagement on the journey that we are on. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Toby. Does anyone else want to speak to this particular recommendation? Marvin?
Yeah, I mean, my points can come in any number of points. I think the first thing I'd say when we're talking about noting progress is in that there is an opportunity there to just mirror back into the Solace report, item L, which is recommendation L, which speaks to revisit the process for project evaluation with regard to models adopted in other combined authorities. And I think we'll all agree that, you know, we are in taking on climate change, we are taking on a challenge right now that is of a scale and a pace that we haven't faced before. So by definition, what we are doing is new. We can't afford too many missteps on the way, and so we have to be in a permanent state of learning how to be most effective. And so I think as we go through this, whenever we're talking about more finance, whenever we're talking about refining the plan, which again should be in constant review, that we're making sure that it's attached to a rock solid, best in class evaluation program that we are constantly in touch with.
Thank you, Marvin. Richard.
I just want to. I do want to just hone in on the action around increased uptake of public transport. I mean, it is perfectly obvious, and many speakers have said it already today, that you cannot expect people to forego car journeys if there is no viable alternative. And the viable alternative in our area is predominantly bus transport. And the number of people I speak to who say, well, I would leave my car at home, or I would not use the car if there was a good alternative. And it's just interesting just to reflect back on what Richard was saying earlier on about concessionary fares. I can tell you from conversations I have with people, the reason concessionary fare bus holders are not using their tickets is that there is no damn bus, or the service is poor and irregular and has been cut. That is the problem. And what people do in those circumstances is they abandon the bus as an alternative. So I think this is not, I think the progress is what it is, but this is not a particularly challenging objective. And I don't think that tap on, tap off actually increases uptake of public transport. It makes it easier, and that's welcome. I think that's good. But actually, if you want to really make impacts on this, we have to lift our game substantially. And I won't rehearse the problems everybody is talking about. So I think that when this comes forward for revision in the future, much more effort needs to be put into this. Because frankly, the bus service in this area is a disgrace, and it is deteriorating, and everybody knows it's deteriorating. And it's not helpful, I don't think, to try and ascribe blame as to why that might be. What we need actually here is serious analysis and serious solutions to what is actually a very deep-seated problem. And the problem is not of our causing. I think Richard is right. This is what's happening in the bus industry. But to be honest with you, it sticks in my throat to be handing millions more pound money to private operators for a deteriorating service. This is not the way to go.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, now if I take the votes at the end all together, and we'll carry on this discussion because Toby's indicated he wants to come in on various recommendations. So if we move to recommendation 2 now, that is to adopt the Climate and Ecological Strategy and Action Plan 2023 as set out in Appendix 3. Toby, would you like to kick us off with that? Maybe you don't want to comment on that. I might have got that wrong.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief comment. I think the key priorities for next year, broadly speaking, look right. Following on from the work that we've done in South Gloucestershire in our plan to 2030, and the recognition in that report that we're not currently on target to meet our 2030 objectives. I think it'd be not only useful, but I think really important to be able to define the likely gap after accounting for local and national impacts of policies in order to assist with our priority setting across the region. So that's just a point for suggestion.
Thank you, Toby. Marvin.
Thank you, Dan. Look, I think again this comes back to one of the points in the Solace report, which Jeff, you've challenged us on, is how we work together. So and within that, one of those questions that Winston picked up, which is about having that conversation about the role of the combined authority, is one that we should have, so that we can think about how we best play the cards we each have. And we are local authorities, obviously different to the combined authority. And I guess the challenge for us all, in all of the challenges we face, is in coming into a combined authority, is how do we become more than the sum of our parts? So it's worth, when we think about working together, think about the context in which we are pursuing any strategy. So one of the things that needs to be considered, I think, is that actually much of the delivery of projects will be done by the authorities themselves. And so we could probably make good use of resource if we make sure we don't set up two bits of machinery to deliver where one bit would do. And so taking some of the combined authority firepower to bring better coordination and amplification of what we're doing, I think could be a good use of resource. So if we take some examples within Bristol in terms of delivery, we've the country's largest water source heat pump in our harbour. We've the largest onshore wind turbine, which is currently being constructed in Avonmouth and Lance Western by Ambition Lance Western. And I'd suggest that's worth looking at, actually, because the method of delivering that is through community-based organisations with some social investment. So how we release the finance to actually get the technology deployed is something that and learning from that is something we could all do. Bristol City Leap represents a huge step forward, actually, in partnership. And I'm sure it'll be close to both of us, because the leader of our parties talked about how we unlock that partnership between public and private money to get the scale of investment we're going to need. And we're looking to retrofit and deliver 182 megawatts of new renewable energy generation through the nearly £500 million of investment that comes through City Leap. So we welcome the paper, but I think context is incredibly important. I'll just add to that a real opportunity in what we do in the west of England as well to get some alignment. The first thing I think I'd point to is 3CI, which you may be aware of already, because the M10 have just joined that. So we founded that as Core Cities. I'm chairing Core Cities now, obviously, and we founded that along with Greg Clark, London Councils, and UK Cities Catapult. We now include key cities in that and Scottish cities. Now, 3CI has identified over a £200 billion pipeline of decarbonisation investment opportunities. And the reason for identifying the pipeline is an acknowledgement that one of the reasons, and I think someone referred to it earlier on, one of the reasons cities, in particular local areas in general, have not been able to access the scale of funding they need for their projects has been scale. Shovel-ready schemes, but scale. But by offering that scale of investment pipeline, we are in a better position to get hold of that money that Mark Carney told us at COP in Glasgow was out there. And so there's an amazing opportunity, I think, to make sure that we're absolutely wedded into that pipeline. The second is an event that's happening next week called the Urban Summit. So we're leading a piece of work along with Andy Haldane, who's the Chief Exec of the RSA, on the future of cities. It's based around three questions. What are cities? What do we need them to be, and how do we get them there? Now, I'd suggest, again, inputting to that piece of work, that one of the things we need cities to be, amongst being inclusive, affordable to live in, efficient, is decarbonised. That leads us into that third question: how do you get them there? Well, there are three planks to that, but the work is yet to be pinned down. One is you need policy support, you need policy space, and you need adequate finance of the right type, patient capital, and all the rest of it. And again, matching what we do over here, making sure that it is connected to those national conversations that will be finished off over the summer, I think could present an incredible opportunity to make sure that we are in the grain and in the right place to receive funding as and when it comes. My final point is just if I can just make a point of clarification as well. And on page 29, paragraph 2.7, I'm sure this is just maybe a bit of loose language. There's a reference to electric vehicle charging, and the paragraph suggests, it goes on to say, following Bristol City Council's indication that they are not going to proceed with on-street charging element of the EV project, the combined authority is pursuing ways to deliver a compliant final case. That's actually not accurate. We have not said that we're not proceeding with street charging. What we have said is we have real concerns about lamppost charging, but we do want to proceed with charging hubs. So the money that's allocated to that, the 2.2 million, what we would like to do is, in the name of coordination, come up with a more city-appropriate, dense city-appropriate way of rolling out on-street charging for electric vehicles. So I hope we can just clarify that today. Not a big thing, but we just have to make sure the language is accurate so we're not misrepresented. We don't end up missing out financially as we try to meet our carbon targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Marvin, Richard.
Yes, and just following the same issue really, but I want to talk a bit about livable neighbourhoods. The council is just about to embark on a trial scheme to test out various options that exist for on-street EV charging. I mean, people will notice that increasingly people are running cables across the pavement, which is dangerous. They're doing all sorts of makeshift arrangements to charge their cars. And that's not acceptable to us, but in a city, particularly like Bath, which is very, very difficult with historic pavements and all the rest of it to adapt, we're going to try out a number of methods. But what I wanted to really just talk a bit about was livable neighbourhoods, because I welcome the actions that have been set out, the detailed actions in the plan, and I think they are the right ones. But the issue I wanted to highlight was that we should not underestimate the challenge that we have got to carry people with us on this agenda. In my own ward at the moment, I have a residence parking zone that is about to be introduced in the summer, which has been not universally popular with the residents there, but also a coterminous livable neighbourhood proposal being worked up at the same time. And what we're finding is that people are very schizophrenic about their attitude to this. You talk to them about climate change, they say, yes, of course, I support this. It's really important. We must do this. We must have less cars. We must have less pollution and less carbon emissions. And then when you start to introduce the solutions to that in terms of limitations on vehicle parking and so on, suddenly it's not so good for them. So there is a big piece of work to be done alongside these ambitions to carry people with us, because if we are constantly having to battle against residents when we want to introduce something that ultimately is beneficial, then we, it's going to be much harder. So we have to carry people with us. I'm not sure we've won that battle yet. People think that, it's the council trying to make money, or we're trying to stop people exercising their liberties or things like that. But I think if that programme is going to be successful, and I think it has the potential to form a really good backbone of interventions that could be applied anywhere within the Wecker area, to be honest. But it's just that I want to highlight that word of warning that we are not carrying the public with us at the moment. They don't see this as a positive agenda. And I think that is partly because as policymakers locally and nationally, we have not joined up the dots sufficiently to make the connection for people. And I think we're going to need to do that, and we need to work together to do that.
Thank you, Richard. And I do agree that is a real challenge. You've only got to look at the experience of Cambridge at the moment, where there is absolute turmoil about what people want to do, and yet in general, people there are very progressive on the environment, and yet they are feeling very strongly about some of the proposals that are going or being put forward and considered right now. It is difficult, and it does mean we will have to work together, not least because as politicians, it's easy to get political advantage from this, and we've got to kind of be disciplined because the environment is at stake. We have to kind of work together and kind of agree a line to get where we really need to be. All right. Okay. Right. Yes. Sorry, Marvin. Sorry.
Yeah. So just before we move on this, can we just kind of get clarification on the EV charging paragraph? That I think is really important. Just
absolutely,
representation
Marvin.
of Bristol. Just
okay.
Just for representation of Bristol, but also financial consequences of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely fine, Marvin. You've made it absolutely clear. Everyone's heard. We're very happy to hear that and to understand what's going on. That's great.
Are we able to lock down the financial consequences as well?
I'm absolutely not certain. Let me just double check, because I'm not quite. Now you've said that, I'm wondering what those consequences might be. So I better just have a quick
I can
check.
explain. So there's two.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on. Let me turn off, and then people can hear you.
Yeah. Sure. So there's £2.2 million allocated to Bristol. And then a bunch of that then was held back as a consequence of the misinterpretation, or I think there was I just think it's lost in translation somewhere that we were not interested in on-street charging. So we just need our allocation of that money continue to come to Bristol, so we can continue to press with our on-street charging plans for the city.
Thank you for being clear. Can I just get one of our officers to just check something on that? And the reason I tell you that is because when I raised it, because I didn't think it was correct, and I did ask my officers, and they did ask and communicate with your officers, and we didn't get the clarity that we've got today, which is great, and I appreciate that. What they did say, it was something to do with it being a kind of group contract with each of the unitaries, because all three of you were involved. So can someone just tell me whether I'm going to be agreeing to something that may not be okay or something. And as you've just raised it today, we need a bit of time. Okay. Right, in that case, can we now move to discussion around recommendation 3, which is to support the expansion of the Green Recovery Fund by £10 million to invest in priority projects that target the climate and ecological emergencies, including allocating £6 million from the existing Combined Authority Investment Fund headroom, as shown in Table 8.1 of this report. Toby, I'm going to start with you because you started last time. If you have any comments, you're very welcome to come in now.
Chair, thank you. Yes, I do have some comments, and in support of the recommendation, and there are elements to it that I'd particularly like to welcome. The first one is the Heat from Mines project. So in South Gloucestershire, we're exploring how our coal mining heritage can sustainably help to meet the region's future renewable heating and cooling needs. We've got extensive mining heritage in parts of the district, Kingswood, Mangotsfield, extending to Colbert Heath, obviously the clue's in the name, and places like Westerly. And that's over 40 coal seams and more than 1,000 different mine entrances. And the old mines are filled with floodwater, which is naturally heated by underground geological activity. Now, using heat pumps, the water temperature can be raised to the level required for space heating and domestic hot water. This could then be used to supply single buildings such as schools, hospitals, offices, or a heat network that then serves multiple buildings or a district. And we estimate that there is 20 to 26,000 homes and businesses that are located within the vicinity of former mine workings with a potential heat resource. And as I said, in addition to that provision of heat, mine water can possibly be also used to provide cooling during the summer months. Now, the next stage of the project is to identify the scale of potential heat and cooling demand from within the broad areas of search already identified, and how we reconcile some of the desk-based records of the former mining, the mine workings and hydrology with actual data, so we understand what it is that we're dealing with there. Now, the intention is ultimately to de-risk private sector investment by removing the inherent uncertainty in accessing a resource that is at this stage challenging to quantify, and to also assess potential key so-called anchor load customers that along with quantifying the demand from retrofitting homes themselves. So I think a really innovative project that we are seeking to deliver that is a national first. And I think there's something really really inspiring about how looking back at our proud industrial heritage across the region, that actually might hold the answer to meeting our decarbonisation challenges. The second comment I'd like to make is just in relation to the extension of the local authority advice support project. There's a reference to it within Appendix 1, and just wanted to stress the importance of making sure that WECA funding is used to complement and bolster the existing services that the councils provide. In our case, we have a successful warm and well scheme that we use to target fuel poverty and the wider determinants of health. This is for people struggling with energy bills. It can be at sometimes confusing and overwhelming landscape in terms of understanding where to go for help and advice. So I think the last thing we want to be doing is to inadvertently make that more complicated still by potentially duplicating work that's already going on within parts of the region. So I would just make that plea, please, Chair. Otherwise, I conclude my comments on this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Marvin, would you like to talk on this? No, okay. Richard?
Yes, just briefly, I'm very supportive of this, and it's good to see an expansion of the funding. I just wanted to hone in on on housing retrofit. This is a huge issue for us in Bath. There are 3,000 listed buildings, many of them Grade 1 listed, and retrofitting those buildings to modern energy conservation standards is exceptionally difficult. But what I wanted to just kind of put out there was that the Bath Preservation Trust, which is an independent organisation, has done an enormous amount of work on this. And I think it would be quite good to test technologies that are available and perhaps work with the Preservation Trust and the Council to see what we can do in terms of exemplar schemes. Certainly something we would be very interested in. It's something we have committed to in the Milson Quarter work that WECA has funded. So I think by working together on something very specific as a demonstration project, we could do something really innovative. So I welcome that opportunity.
Great, thanks, Richard. I concur with that. And I can't. Can I give praise to Toby? This is a rare occasion, so I'm going to do it now. Good work happening on trying to get energy from those mines, those former pits. I have family who actually worked in Coalpit Heath pit, Pensford pit, and other North East Somerset pits. And I can't think of anything that would be more fantastic than to think that what had contributed to CO2 emissions over many hundreds of years was able to turn around to reduce them. It would be absolutely great. So there's a kind of irony, but also an important purpose there. And what I'd like to see, Toby, is your good ideas expanded right across the west of England, the whole point of the combined authority, so that we can make sure that whatever good work is going on is happening in every possible place where it can make a difference. So well done to you. Okay, let's talk about recommendation 4. I'll read it out. If people have comments, then they can come in. As part of the Green Recovery Fund expansion, further development work will take place to determine supply and demand for green construction skills, building on the post-16 education infrastructure report and aligning with a refreshed West of England employment and skills plan, with an update to come to June 2023 committee meeting. Okay, does anyone wish to make any comments on that? Yes, Toby, thank you.
Chair, thank you. I did wish to comment in support of this recommendation, and so there are 4 points to it: retrofit, SGS College, future development needs, and then the wider education and skills plan. So Richard's already talked about retrofit and some of the challenges that we face. In terms of the jobs and the requirement for skills, we know that a significant ramp up is required in order for us to meet the region's climate change targets, and actually that will provide many new opportunities for people. We know that within the WECA region there's currently just over 6,000 low carbon, in inverted commas, jobs, but if we're to meet the challenge around net zero, we need a further 50,000 net total jobs in order to be able to meet demand. So a big challenge, but also some huge opportunities for people up and down the region. I think that then links on to my next point, which is around South Gloucestershire and Stroud College. Now, SGS is the largest further education college in the west of England, so of real significant regional importance. The college's construction department at Filton was built in the 1950s, and for anyone who has visited there in the last few years will see how significantly compromised it is in several areas around capacity, teaching flexibility, running costs and maintenance. And these are issues that have all been recognised by many. Now, to meet the immediate short-term needs and to accommodate their apprenticeship students, SGS College has recently established a small construction training facility within the Horizon 38 development in Filton for their construction apprentices, and I visited there on Tuesday, and what they've achieved with minimal financial resources is incredibly impressive, and great ingenuity has been demonstrated, including that the apprentices have been used to fit out the units themselves. So that's saved about £100,000, 20% of the total labour costs, whilst simultaneously contributing valuable experience for them as they progress through their courses. Now, SGS are keen to replicate this low-cost model to help them to accommodate their wider intake of 500 full-time construction skills students per year, teaching them the vital green construction skills in a safe environment that is ultimately conducive to learning. I talked earlier about how the college is of significant regional importance. Most of the students attending courses at their two different campuses within South Gloucestershire don't actually live within South Gloucestershire. Only 46% of the students come from South Gloucestershire, 36% Bristol, 2% Baines, 4% North Somerset, and then 12% completely outside the region, including as far as Newport and Swindon. When I visited the site on Tuesday, I conducted my own straw poll of the construction apprentices I met, and of the 8 plastering and bricklaying students I spoke with, only 2 lived within South Gloucestershire. The other 6 were from across the region and beyond, including Chippenham and Swindon. So the college does truly serve wider than the West of England region alone. And importantly, around deprivation, the college provides education training for some of the most disadvantaged young people in the combined authority area. Over 1/3 of students who attend the college come from the most deprived 20% of areas in England in terms of education and skills, and then in turn many of the students would be NEET if they were not on the courses. So this in turn then links to how can we help and support colleges like SGS to help to meet the demands that we know that we've got around construction skills. We know that whatever the number is that we're going to have to build many tens of thousands of homes across the region over the coming period, and that we need at least 1.5 million square metres of new commercial space across the region as well. So I welcome the refreshed employment and skills plan, that it will be coming back to our meeting in June. It is of vital regional importance that we make progress with our strategies and our activities, that we can get on and address those challenges that I've talked about with important partners like SGS College, and that can ultimately unlock the answers to meeting the challenges that we know that we've got around climate and nature emergencies. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Toby. Marvin, do you want to speak on this?
Yeah, sure. So thank you. So we were talking about this with an LGA working group yesterday, actually Local Government Association working group. So one is just to say just how important it is to have this on the agenda and to have it explicitly spelt out. I think amongst the perversities of climate change is that it's the poorest and most vulnerable who get hit first and hardest by the consequences of climate change. But then they're also most vulnerable to being structured out of the economy as we go through the restructuring that we need to go through. So it's incredibly important that we've talked today, haven't we, about getting upstream, thinking longer term. We've heard earlier on about keeping the public with us as well. What we don't want is loss, because if people do experience loss as a result of what we do around climate change, we could end up losing the dressing room, which turns into political opposition to the measures we need to take to decarbonise, to protect nature, and all the rest. So making sure that we have the skills programmes in place and making sure that people got access to them in a timely manner ahead and can have some confidence in the future is incredibly important. I'll just drop this in because it was a conversation we had yesterday just about the whole branding of green jobs. We need to green all jobs, isn't it, right? So, and we have to just be careful that we don't end up talking about an economy for techie environmentalist PhDs, right? There are fundamentals we need to do. Climate change will not, the restructuring we need to go through to decarbonise the way we work will not be delivered by having a high-profile, hard-hat photograph project here and another one there. It's the fundamentals of the way we live, the nuts and bolts of the kind of homes we build and where we build them, the way our transport system works, the way we generate, process, minimise the generation of waste, as well. So across all of our industries, we can think about the skills of specific individuals, but I think it could also be opportune for us to take some time, Richard, to talk with you and Matt to talk with business about how we green the context within which employment takes place. So whatever job it is coming at a lower price to the planet. And actually some of the skills we build up is how people to go into those traditional areas and decarbonise them as a matter of course.
Thank you, Marvin. Richard? No. Okay, thank you very much. Well, really appreciate all those comments and really interesting contributions, and I've been moved by them, frankly. They're very, very interesting indeed. Before we move on to go through the recommendations and vote on them in turn, can I just make a thank you to my staff in the West England Combined Authority for their fantastic success in getting us the Great Avon Wood, which is about to start. I planted, I think, one of the first trees only the other week. It's 113 acres of trees. 40,000 trees will be planted over the next 3 years, involving volunteers. It's the biggest tree planting exercise we understand in the whole of the West of England's history, which is great. It builds on the things that other leaders are doing here. It's really, really important, and they're not necessarily high-techy jobs, but they're the kind of jobs that people are really keen to do and be involved with. And so, green is a very wide definition, and that's why it's exciting, I think, because it appeals to an awful lot of people. Okay, so let's move through the recommendations in turn, if that's okay. So if I move to recommendation 1, all those in favour. Before I do that, Marvin, I've just had a check on the point that you raised. I think is absolutely fine. The comments you've made, the sort of reference you made to other things is in order, so that's absolutely fine, which I'm sure you're not surprised to hear, but I just needed to check, yeah. EV. Yeah, on EV, yeah. Okay, let's move to recommendation 1 then. All those in favour, please show now. Okay, that's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 2, all those in favour, please show now. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Recommendation 3, again, all those in favour, please show now. Okay, that's carried. And recommendation 4, all those in favour, please show now. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Okay, let's move now to item 11, that's the investment fund programme. Now, this paper proposes investing in a number of new projects. I'd now like to move the recommendations as set out in the report. Can I call for a seconder, please, if there's someone who's prepared to second that? Okay, anyone seconding? Yes, okay, thank you, Toby. Would you like to speak on that now, Toby?
Chair, I'm conscious I did most of the speaking on the previous one, so happy to second, and I will have comments on one of the recommendations. So I'm happy to come back.
Okay, just indicate as and when, then we'll just work through this as best we can. Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? No. Sorry, Marvin, do you want to speak now?
Yeah, if I can just raise another point of clarification. I don't think I'll do much more than raise it today, but I would urge you to have a look at it because I think it could leave Bristol at a bit of a financial disadvantage while we're going through discussions. On the CRSTS money, at the moment, there's financial support going to South Gloucestershire and Baines to support ongoing work on transport, but it seems that because we're in conversations with you about our transport team coming over, which we think is the right thing because it's about being a strategic lead on transport, that we won't get access to that level of support, which is considerable because it's just over £1 million. The challenge is that we are yet to finalise that piece of work, and so what I would suggest is it would be good to think about if before we do finalise that piece of work, our work still goes on. And so it would seem to me that the appropriate time to look at whether that support is passported over to Bristol or not was when the actual deal is finally done and we know what the situation is, not before it's been finalised. So I'd welcome your thoughts on your officers' work on that, what I think is a bit of a financial anomaly.
Okay, well, I agree with you, Marvin. We need to make sure that that's done properly in the way you suggest, so let's do that. I did notice that there hadn't been that claim on that money some time ago, and I did wonder, but you've made it clear we need to take into account that situation and deal with it properly. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else wishes to speak? Toby? No? Okay. Right, sorry, someone coming in? Marvin?
We're still in the infrastructure, I'm guessing. Yeah. I mean, just because it has come up, I wasn't going to say much, but I would, because a few of the guests have talked about transport as well. I mean, and actually what I would say about that is, really, if we take another lens on it, it should be a really interesting and exciting time for us as a region. Because for the first time in decades, it seems like we're all lined up behind an understanding of the scale and challenge of our regional transport offer, and we're all lined up behind an intention to do something. Now, whether we differ on the technology, the routes or whatever, that's secondary, right? It's about how do we get ourselves lined up to deliver a solution. Just in terms of some of the conversations specifically in Bristol, I would just say, by the way, is I think someone has recently said, well, don't look at the long term because you've got to deal with what's right now. And we've said today, haven't we, in our conversations, we deal with the immediate challenges that we face right now, but we do need to plan for the long term. As you said, Rich, this is a 10, 15, 20-year horizon program, and whatever we do needs to happen over, we need to deal with people who are being left on bus stops with bus schedules changing as they watch right now. It happened to me just a few weeks ago, trying to get from my mum's house on Stableston Road. Bus was promised in 15 minutes. 55 minutes later, I decided to walk. So I've been there, done that. All right? We need to deal with that. The very real points you made, Dave, about economic inclusion and transport poverty. We know that transport has implications for access to public services, it has mental health implications for social isolation, and as we said, economic inclusion. And obviously, we always talk about the environmental benefits as well as of modal shift as well, which is obviously at the forefront, of our thinking. A couple of people talked about trams, so let me stay away from specific modes, but let me just suggest a few kind of characteristics. I think what we will need to support that modal shift is something that is fully segregated, timely, reliable, safe. Again, one of the conversations that's been had about transport is not just whether it turns up, as to whether people feel safe moving from front door to the means of transport, whether they feel safe on that transport and going home. Particularly when we think of some of the work that Nicola Beach and Carly Heath, our nighttime advisor, has been doing on the nighttime economy. And in fact, Carly Heath was in my office just yesterday, Dan, talking about when we think about nighttime economy, it's often pubs and bars, but actually it's health staff as well, trying to get home. And when the buses stop at 10:30, how do you get back to Stockwood if you've done a night shift in the BRI, for example? I think too, one of the other things to think about is the price we pay during construction. There is an argument that said that, that the disruption, and we were heard earlier on about stopping cars going into the middle of the centre. I think all other things being equal, we would prefer not to have cars sharing spaces with human beings, but all other things are not equal. And as we heard, Richard, we've got to keep people with us. Now, there is a point at which when a system is running, you can justify disruption because there is a viable alternative. But there's a period of time between
The moment you dig that first hole, and I'm not prejudicing whether it's under or over, but you're going to dig a hole at some point. From the moment you start the project to when it is first running, you are getting all the construction but none of the benefits. That has to be taken into account when we're thinking about the consequences, keeping the dressing room with us in terms of the democratic popular support, and also the economic and inclusion consequences of that. So I just think I'd just say, not anticipating the specific kit or the specific routes, but I think there are some things that it's incredibly important that we bear in mind. And if we test ourselves against those, let's see what happens when we test ourselves against those where we end up, rather than just jumping forward and, even though, like, I think trams is something that people have loved for a long time, and that's fantastic. But I think we do have to think about all those wider challenges. I think too, I think the points made about being in the right place at the right time are also incredibly important. I think there is an interest from national government, but as I mentioned earlier on as well, with the work around 3CI and also World Economic Forum work at the moment as well, there is money looking for shovel-ready opportunities to invest. I think it would be, going back to that first point, that we should be excited at this moment in opportunity, because I think we got our ducks in line. We can sit on the same side of the table and look at the challenge on the other side of the table, rather than that we can get ourselves lined up to be best positioned to profile the scale of opportunity that can be unlocked if government was to support us with some enabling money in tackling our own transport problems. So I think we should be positive about where we are.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Richard.
Thanks. Just two things I want to say, really. First, I welcome the proposals around the CRSDS funding for Bath North East, Somerset and South Gloss, and acknowledge what Marvin is saying as well, that's important. And I just wanted to say that a decision like this represents very good intent, because it recognises the additionality that is required if we are to move agendas forward together, and it recognises the resource pressures on us as unitary authorities. So I welcome that. I think it's a very positive step. I just want to say a few words about Bath Central Riverside, because people might not know what we're talking about here. So this is the area from broadly from Pulteney Bridge to right down to really to the bus station at the other end, and the land in between. And what people might not realise, if you have been to Bath to see that area, is that first of all there are some potentially big development opportunities within there. We don't know yet what the post office will do about the post office sorting office, which occupies a massive riverside site. Manvers Street itself is built on vaults, and the vaults are unstable, so the road, to all intents and purposes, looks like an ordinary road, but it's not. It's actually built on vaults underneath it, vaulted structures, and it's not in good condition. So what this funding application will do is to enable us to study the circulation and movement opportunities that exist within this area and develop a strategic master plan. And it is important, not only because of the location of the main railway station and the bus station, but actually it is a key node of transport between the north and the south of the city. So I really welcome this, and I think what will come forward in due course will be a very complementary piece of work to the pieces of work we're doing elsewhere on the city centre in Bath. So I welcome that.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each recommendation. Please speak further if you want to before we go to the votes, but although some of you already touched on some of the recommendations already, so you may not want to come in. So if we start by looking at recommendation 1, which is for us to approve the strategic outline case for Bath Central Riverside and the award of £548,000 to develop the master plan by March 2025 as set out in paragraph 2.6. Does anyone else wish to speak to that? I think Richard's touched on that, obviously. In that case, can we move to the vote? All those in favour, please show now. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Then recommendation 2, to approve the funding application for walking and cycling scheme development for completion by March 2025 and the award of £200,000 as set out in paragraph 2.6. Does anyone want to speak to that? Okay, in that case, all those in favour, please show now. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 3, to approve the feasibility and developmental funding application for CRSTS, South Gloucestershire Council's specialist support, and the award of £670,000 is set out in paragraph 2.6. Anyone wish to speak to that? Toby?
Chair, yes, I would like to speak in support of this recommendation. So this funding will be vital to enable the Council to deliver on its elements of the CRSTS programme in partnership with colleagues at the Combined Authority. It will be used to mobilise specialist resources, including property and communications specialists, to ensure that we properly engage with our residents as we progress through each of the elements that we are responsible for, and ultimately to ensure that the programme is delivered efficiently and effectively. Chair, I might just make a comment now, and then I don't need to speak on the rest of the recommendations, if that's all right. But I just thought I would just come in and make some comments around mass transit, as it has been brought up in this meeting. So, just start off by saying that I'm supportive of mass transit. I think it is important that we are ambitious for the region, and we think about what will come after we have completed Metro Bus and Metro Bus extensions and Metro West and active travel, that as we work our way through those particular programmes and make progress on each of those, that actually what comes next in order to deliver the step change that we need to see in transport across the region. We do need to take that long-term strategic view. I think that there are opportunities to be able to lever in private and institutional funding to be able to deliver on much of this, but you do need to get projects up to a particular stage in order to be credible enough that those alternative sources of funding can in fact be levered into the region. And I think, given everything we've spoken about around the climate emergency, a high quality public transport network is vitally important in providing for our communities to travel sustainably around the region, particularly as we grow and as we need to link up new communities with existing communities and ensure that we don't compound some of the problems that we have historically had within the region. So yeah, I'll leave my comments there, Chair, and I don't need to speak on any of the remaining recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Toby. All right, in that case, let's go to the vote on recommendation 3 unless anyone else wants to speak on it. No. Okay, all those in favour, please show now. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 4, to approve the allocation of up to £670,000 for City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlements resourcing in Bath and North East Somerset Council, and delegate the approval of the detail through a feasibility and development funding application to the Combined Authority Director of Infrastructure in consultation with the Directors of Infrastructure of the constituent councils as set out in paragraph 2.6. It's this kind of language that excites me so much. I just want you to know that. Anyone wish to speak to that? Yes, Richard.
Well, just really to expand on what I said earlier, this work is extraordinarily difficult within the urban area in Bath in particular, and on the work on transport corridors. This is going to be very, very difficult work, so this extra resourcing will help that really very complex work. I mean, one of the realities of undertaking any work to highways in central Bath is that often the records of where utilities have run their services are simply not there or are inaccurate. So when one digs up the road anywhere or does any alteration, one finds enormous problems underneath the ground that the council and its predecessor councils were not aware of. So I welcome this. It will make a big difference.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, in that case, all those in favour, please show now. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Okay, recommendation 5, to amend the approved capital programme for individual project approvals agreed at the January committee and within this report as set out in Appendix 2. I'm assuming no one's desperate to make a comment on that. In that case, all those in favour, please show now. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 6, to note that the provision of £4 million has been set aside to manage programme risks as set out in paragraph 2.8. Anyone wishing to speak to that? No. Okay, all those in favour, please show now. Thank you again. That's been carried unanimously. Okay, now I understand that we have 2 new recommendations as an addendum, which has been circulated. Is that? Can I just check that everyone is aware of that? Yeah. Okay, Toby. Richard, have you had this? Yeah. We're not blindsiding you in any way. No, that's the downside of using computers. Marvin, are you okay on that? You got what you need? Right. Right, okay. Well, I'll just read the recommendation.
Yeah.
That's what we were just given, isn't it?
Yeah.
Guys, while you're going through that, can Richard just briefly talk to this, because this is a funny one, isn't it? So just let people know about the timing so that they're aware of what's going on.
I will do. There's been an underspend in the department, DLUC department for levelling up, which we were made aware of, which we could utilise for the benefit of the region. So over £18 million. So a really good news item for us to spend within the region. It was embargoed. We were allowed to sort of press on, but it was embargoed until budget day on Wednesday. So really, it's just to regularise it and to put it into the budget. It's been circulated to the chief executives some time ago under that embargo, and also the Section 151 officers of the authorities, and obviously they will have made sure that the infrastructure directors were pushing on with delivery, because to make sure the money was spent. In addition, we received some additional, but it's on the DFT website at the moment. We haven't received the written confirmation yet, but some additional pothole money. When we receive it, we'll apportion it out in the same way that we had previously to the 3 unitary authorities. So it's some additional money for potholes as well. We haven't had the formal written confirmation yet, though. So, but the website hopefully is correct.
Okay. Is everybody happy that they're on side now with
I was
this?
happy with money for potholes.
Yeah. You still won't be able to tell me how many go in the Albert Hall, though, will you? Okay. Right, in that case, can I just go through this new recommendation? So we're absolutely crystal on this. So it's to endorse and approve the approach for the £18.175 million DLVHC in-year capital funding as set out in the report. All those in favour, please show now. Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. And then the second new recommendation, which relates to these potholes, as referred to by Marvin and others, the committee is asked to endorse the additional DFT pothole funding for 2023-24 to be passported to the relevant West of England unitary authorities in line with proposals agreed for the Highway Maintenance Capital Grant. Have I got that right?
It says proportions.
Proportions. Let's get that right. Proportions. Does anyone want me to read that again, or are you all happy with that? Okay. Thank goodness. All those in favour show now. Carried unanimously. Thank you very much for your patience with that item. Okay, we now move on to item 12, the Investment Fund Delivery Assurance. This paper seeks approval for a number of changes to schemes within the Investment Fund programme, which have been reviewed and endorsed by the Programme Review Board. I would now like to move the recommendation as set out in the report. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Marvin. Would you like to speak to this now or later? It's okay. All right. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Richard, no. Toby, no. Okay. In that case, let me just have a look. I think it's just that one. Yes, it is. Okay. In that case, those who are in support of the recommendation, please show now. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, now moving to item 13. This item is indicative meetings timetable 2023-24 and managing the period prior to the annual meeting. This looks like another riveting read, this one, Richard. Thank you for that. This paper is really about in-house administration. It's asking for endorsement of the provisional timetable of meetings for the years 2023-24 to enable the appropriate planning of meetings to take place in accordance with Standing Order 8A.1, which I know we're all terribly familiar with. In accordance with Standing Order A7.1, the paper also seeks agreement to set the 16th of June 2023 as the date for the West of England Combined Authority Committee annual meeting. Finally, as some councils are about to enter their pre-election period, which starts on Monday, this paper seeks to put in place provisional and prudent arrangements to allow for emergency decision-making should the need arise, between the dates of the election on the 4th of May and this annual meeting. So that's what it's about. Does anyone, so can I now move that recommendation as set out in the report? Is there anyone can second that for me, please? Thank you, Richard. Does anyone wish to speak to this? No burning desire?
I would just say, just in light of some of those changes, it'd be just to have it in mind that as we go through the Solace recommendations and the EY recommendations, there may be feedback into our constitution, and our culture that we would like to, implement. So we just make sure that we get that thinking as aligned as we possibly can.
Very happy to do that, Marvin. Point well made. Okay, so in that case, thank you for your comments. So recommendation 1. Let's get that right. Yes, recommendation 1 is that the indicative timetable of meetings for 23-24 are set out in Appendix 1 to be endorsed for formal agreement by the West of England Combined Authority at its annual meeting in June 23, subject to any changes arising following consultation. Those in favour, please show now. Okay, carried unanimously. Recommendation 2, that the date of the annual meeting of the West of England Combined Authority Committee be agreed as the 16th of June 2023. All those in favour, please show. Carried unanimously, thank you. And recommendation 3, that the acting chief executive be delegated the authority to act at his discretion in response, well, we should say at their discretion, in response to any matter requiring decision prior to the annual meeting, subject to no obligations by the chief... Sorry, objections. Thank you for that. Important correction, subject to no objections by the chief executive officers of the constituent councils. Marvin, do you want to speak?
No, that's great. Again, I would hate to be this person, but there was another word missed out. If it matters, it doesn't. It just says the... go on then.
Yeah. Go on then. Don't really want to. I don't want to, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do my best. Okay. Thank you. That the acting chief executive be delegated the authority to act at his discretion, at their discretion, in response to any other matter requiring decision prior to the annual meeting, subject to no objections by the chief executive officers of the constituent councils. Those in favour, please show. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Great. Right, item 15, Audit Action Plan, feedback from Audit and Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Progress Report. We've got Jim here today, so... I've missed 14 now, have I? All right. Right, we could have gone 15. We did it for Jeff, didn't we? We changed the order for Jeff. We could have done it. Okay, let's go to 14 then. Okay, that's the West of England Combined Authority and Mayoral Budget Forecast Outturn 22-23. I would now like to move the recommendations as set out in the report. Is there a seconder, please? Thanks, Toby. Do any members wish to speak on this item? Toby?
Chair, thank you. I would like to give notice of an additional recommendation that has been circulated in advance of our meeting today. I'm not sure when you'd like to take that, but just to flag that I would like to propose that at the appropriate time, please.
Okay, thanks, Toby. Is that the one that came in at 10 o'clock or something like that this morning? Is that the one?
It would have been circulated this morning.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, on buses.
Right, let me have a look. In that case, right, can someone guide me here? Stephen, could you just guide me on this one?
Do you want me to read the amendment?
Why not?
Right. The amendment as to be proposed by Councillor Toby Savage, Leader of South Gloucestershire Council, amendment to item 14, additional recommendation 4, As the agreed 2-month bus extensions across the region are being put in place, costs are reported to be rising in excess of the funding requested and set aside by the unitary authority councils to support these services. Accordingly, the committee is recommended to reduce the planned 7,805,000 contribution to the Treasury Reserve, see Appendix 2, at year end to cover the cost increases on such routes, including to school services, with the view that this is replenished into the Treasury Reserves in due course by the efficiencies to come forward from the ongoing review. I would suggest, sir, that you probably need the view of the Section 73 officer on this.
Stephen, I think it's 785k, isn't it? 1,000.
Yes. Is that what that was?
You said some strange number.
No, sorry, it's 785,000.
100,000.
Yes.
Yeah, so 785, 100,000 to be absolutely clear, because that's a big difference, and we want to be clear about that. Okay, so 785k. Right, Richard, you're going to speak to this, yeah, and just give us some context. Or is that?
I mean, I'm happy to. I'm not the Section 73 officer anymore, but I can speak to it if that's helpful on behalf of Stephen's. Arrived a bit late due to trains. I do have the deputy next to me as well. Really, I mean, there are issues with this. They are not unrehearsed from previous meetings. Maybe not exactly the same, but they're not unrehearsed really. This is, as I understand it, the money that so additional to the monies that we put, or that the unitary authorities in effect, plus the reserves, plus the grant I talked about earlier that was used to fund the 20+ million overall of the bus services that we have through the levy. Two of the unitary authorities elected to put additional funding in. I believe that's Bath and North East Somerset and South Gloss, to pay for some additional services for a period of time. The combined authority undertook the tender exercises for that extension of period of time, and those costs have come back in higher than expected. So, for example, without naming the route, in one particular instance, the cost of it was something in the region of just under 50,000. The existing provider did not want to provide the service; they didn't have capacity. It's that capacity point we've talked about earlier. And a new provider, only one other provider was prepared to offer the services, and they've come in with a price that's 3 times, just on that one example. That, as I say, I won't name the route. For obvious commercial reasons, really. So we have had a significant increase in those costs. So I understand the issue and the problem, but the funding for these services, is primarily provided by the unitary authorities. There are challenging and difficult decisions to be made. I get that more than most, particularly with adults and children's pressures, let alone the inflation pressures, etc. that are faced by the authorities. There's a value for money point in that we or the committee drew a line on a number of principles, but there was a value for money principle on the cost per passenger journey. And as you can see, these particular services did not make, to use a golfing term, the cut in terms of making it over the line for that. If the prices are coming in 3 times that, I would suggest to you that the value for money must therefore be worse and more difficult to argue from a value for money perspective. That's a tough, narrow financial view, but it is a view that the committee had. The second point I'd make is, look, the point's been made around late receipt, but I've worked long enough in central and local government to know that you will get late amendments. The third point I'd make, so we haven't done as full an assessment, I would say, to give a view across the table at this stage because of that. Notwithstanding the fact some officers in the authorities have been working on this, it hasn't risen to senior managers per se in the form it did today. The third point I make, and you'll know this because I've said it several times publicly, and so I'm publicly on record for saying it and privately. The reserves of the combined authority are very low. They are inadequate at this stage. There are 5 particular measures that we've looked at across the group of combined authorities. Now, they're different types of organisations and different scales, but we've done measures such as our reserves to net spend, our reserves to gross spend, and 3 others. There are 10 mayoral combined authorities, and with 10 being the place you wouldn't want to be because it's inadequate, and 1 being where you'd want to be on reserves because you could use it for other things. On the 5 measures, we are 10th, i.e. the worst, 10th, 10th, 10th and 9th. Our reserves are inadequate under any measure that you look at, and therefore to take money from the reserves when we ought to be adding to them as much as we possibly can, notwithstanding that we want to do some further work around VFM and efficiencies, at this stage is not something that I would recommend as a CEO. Obviously, the Section 73 officer or deputy, if they want to speak, need to give a view on that. But those are the reasons why I think it is difficult. There is an option, and it is an option given the Unitary authorities elected to put the additional money in for those services, to protect those services for that period of time, for a short period of time, that they could put additional money in to do so. I get that the prices have come back 3 times. It is an indication of some of the challenges we've had over the last 12 months.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. All right, Toby's put forward this amendment. Is that second? Sorry, so you want to speak to it, Toby? You look like you're about to. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Would like to speak on it, and we'll do so now. So, as well as introducing the amendment, I'll also respond to some of the points that officers have made so far. So, the first thing to say is that the situation that we're in, we're not seeking to apportion blame to any party here, but we do find ourselves in a difficult situation, which we can today come together as a partnership to resolve, to ensure a smoother transition to DRT. As all parties are aware, the councils did want to extend a number of supported services over several months, and we as councils built into our budgets the increased costs for next year, and we did that at the level that was advised by WECA. Now, through no fault of WECA or the councils, those costs have now come in higher than anyone thought they would. It is now too late for councils to get approval for those increased costs. As has been said, we enter PERDA next week. We have finished our cycle of meetings in South Gloucestershire. I can't speak for the other authorities, but I imagine we're in similar positions. And so the only decision-making route open to us as a partnership is today's meeting, and to ensure that those vital transitional services can continue to be commissioned. Now, I think the Combined Authority has been very explicit in saying that not all of the DRT services will be up and running from day one, and that having these transitional services extended for a period of time will help to mitigate some of those teething problems and the phasing in of DRT. And in that respect, it is appropriate that, given the councils have already allocated additional budget to the original quotes provided by the Combined Authority, that WECA also make a contribution to help ensure the smooth introduction of DRT and to support more of those communities that may not now see DRT from day one. Ultimately, it is intended that this will be funded from operational efficiencies through WECA's ongoing review, and that was a position that we arrived at as part of agreeing the WECA budgets at our last meeting. So reserves should not be impacted in the medium term if that is the will of the committee moving forward. However, from day one, this is about supporting our communities through the transition rather than putting money we weren't originally expecting into reserves. The constituent councils first started talking to WECA officers on the 2nd of March about the shortfall and options for funding. Now, given the increased costs over and above what we were asked to put aside in our budgets has only just become available to all parties, the only route now open to us as a partnership is through this report today. Importantly, and we understand this from WECA officers, today is the drop-down date for agreeing extensions. So even if we were able to organise council meetings during the restricted PERDA period, we wouldn't be able to do that before the end of today, which is when we have to tell the operators. If I could just remind members about the key statistics related to this. So firstly, how much have we budgeted for? So South Gloucestershire Council has put £85,000 into its budget for 23-24, based on supporting both the 84-85 routes and the 622. In terms of the 622, that is the service in question where costs have gone that have gone up significantly from where we originally advised. Now in 21-22, the annual patronage for the 622 was 34,000, and that equates to 7 passengers per journey. We've contributed over £900,000 to support services on top of our levy payment. Now, that amount equates to an 11%, and I think some of those figures were quoted by Winston earlier. As a council, that represents an 11% increase on the total levy payment that we also make. And within the levy itself, that represents a 45% increase on the supported bus element of the levy. If this doesn't happen today, there will simply be no link between Yate and Thornbury. Based on the 21-22 patronage figures, this will mean over 5,500 journeys that will not be catered for. Importantly, the only option for these passengers would be to use the DRT service from April, and given the numbers could put considerable pressure onto the new DRT services that we already know from public announcements that there are going to be teething and phasing problems. So I think I've responded to what Richard has said around the unitary authorities. We are contributing significantly, but in terms of where we are with our cycle of meetings, we're not in a position to be able to commit further resources. We've simply run out of time to hold more meetings before the pre-election restrictions kick in. I've spoken about the number of passengers, and I've spoken about how there should be no medium-term impact to our reserves, because what we're proposing today should be replenished into those reserves later in the financial year as that efficiencies review is concluded. The councils have put significantly more money in, and I've quoted some of those percentage increases that Winston also quoted earlier on in the meeting. We're not in a position for all those reasons to be able to put more in, but now is an opportunity for the combined authority to put some in as a partnership with the councils. So I propose the amendment, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Fitzgerald, could you just speak to this a little bit, because this only came in very late today after 10 o'clock, and I just want a bit more information if you wouldn't mind. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Dan. As the interim chief executive has said, we are in a position where we are significantly and well below average in our level of reserves. So what I have to say is I would urge caution on this particular issue at this point in time, and I could not recommend that we adopt the approach that the amendment suggests and do that drawdown. I think obviously we are doing efficiency reviews. However, we're also looking at the risk profile of the organisation as a whole, and taking all these factors into account, I think it is not an approach that I personally could recommend to this committee.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, is there a seconder for Toby's amendment? Okay, Stephen. All right, in that case, can we put that to the vote as whether we accept that amendment? Those in favour? Oh, sorry, Richard, did you want to speak?
I'd like to speak to, yes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dan. Well, very much in the same vein as Toby, really. The day for passing any of these increasing costs on to council taxpayers has gone several weeks ago, so we can't revisit that. I yesterday made an urgent decision to add a further £70,000 specifically for the 672 route that we heard about earlier, with a specific purpose of extending the transitional period for 2 months. And I understand council officers have been in touch with the WECA officers to discuss this. So when you add that to the 281,000 that we added to the £1 million on top of the levy that we were already paying, that puts you somewhere in the region of over 30% increase in costs that we have taken on. And I have had to fund that from a specific transport reserve that existed. So it's a one-off thing that can't be repeated. So we're all in the same position here with diminishing reserves, diminishing pressures. The reason I did that, made that decision, was I was very convinced, and we've all heard it here today, by the arguments being put across by those in the True Valley, that this was an essential service. And the attitude, the response we have taken is we need to extend that transitional period. When we committed originally to 2 months extension, I think we hoped and believed that the DRT service would be up and running at the beginning of April. Now, clearly that is slipping a bit, and we're not pointing any fingers to that. It's slipping. It's a complex project. So I think there needs to be some recognition that that has happened and additional funds are needed. And that's what we have done on that specific route, which was the one we have been most heavily lobbied about. So I support very much what Toby has spoken to in moving the amendment. It is something that I think we need to do. I understand the point that Stephen and Richard are making about WECA reserves, and of course if I were in the same position, I would probably be saying the same. But I think if that is the main point of reliance for refusing the amendment, then I actually think we need to go into a bigger discussion, which I'm sure we won't want to have here, about WECA reserves. That is a matter perhaps for another place, another time. So I think I hear what the officers are saying, but I still think we need to press ahead with this amendment.
Thank you, Richard. Richard, you want to make a technical point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one other point that's worth adding, really, just to make sure the committee members are fully aware. There is a significant change in accounting practice. It comes out in 2 years' time, known affectionately as International Financial Reporting Standard 9, where, in essence, any changes in value in our pooled funds as a sort of key area of risk, really. So any of those investments will not be taken through the balance sheet in 2 years' time. They'll be taken through the profit and loss accounts. That'll be the same for the local authorities. The Chartered Institute of Public Financial Accountants, CIPFA, have managed to agree with government a 2-year extension to that. That doesn't mean you wait 2 years to start thinking about the reserves level that you set aside for it. If I had to put that adjustment through, in a week's, 2 weeks' time for the accounts that we're about to close down, through our revenue account rather than our balance sheet, it would wipe out all of those treasury reserves completely, and indeed I'd have to use some of the small reserves that we have as well. So it's a real significant accounting issue for us. It comes in 2 years' time, but it's here already today, really. So it's just another point about the volatility. I mean, I can see people shaking their heads, but it's a very factual point from an accounting point that ought to be understood and known that we have to do.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So is that amendment seconded? I think we were there, weren't we, Richard? Okay, so that's been seconded. Now, before we put that to the vote, can I just say to you, I have very strong advice clearly from my Section 73 officer, Stephen Fitzgerald, just this very moment, which has determined what I'll be doing. But I also am getting advice that, as I understand it, both what Toby and Richard has said in terms of not being able to make an emergency decision effectively is simply not the case. There are processes that you can adopt if you wish to do that. You can do things in PERDA even if you wish to. It's that you are choosing not to do that. And, you know, I'm going to be a politician now. I'd say that this is more about an election bribe than anything else. So look, I'll leave it at that, and I shan't be supporting your amendment. So can we put that to, do you want to say something? Yeah, you can come back again. You have said it already.
I want to say something because I think that's actually wrong. What the decision I made was to use an existing approved budget. What I think Toby and I are talking about is adding to the budgets that exist. And as those of us who are in unitary authorities know, only the full council can make those decisions to amend its main revenue budget. That cannot be done by a single member decision such as I made yesterday. So that's fundamentally wrong. There is no opportunity to make a change as fundamental as this within the PERDA period, because clearly this is a matter of public interest and the public controversy, and we cannot go there. So I think I just have to say that so if anybody is left with the impression, actually this is easy, we can just sign this away, we can't.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Toby.
Thank you, Dan. So I would just reiterate one of the points I made earlier, that today is the drop-down date. So you're wrong to say that there is a mechanism by which we can call a council meeting by the end of today in order to resolve this matter. We might have been able to have done it next week, but even then that is a real push, because legally we have to give 5 clear days when we're looking to make a decision around how to spend public money. You can't just do that suddenly. But that's academic, that today is the final day in order to be able to tell the operators whether or not we're going for this or not. The other point I would make, and it's in relation to what Richard has said about IRS 9, I think I'm right in saying, Richard, from my own knowledge on this subject, that the statutory override in relation to that has already been extended twice. You're nodding? Yes, thank you. So the government will likely have to do something about that again in order to avoid this being a major issue for the sector. They've done it twice already. There's no reason to think they wouldn't do so a third time, but we're getting into real technical issues around accounting practice, which I'm sure the public don't really want to hear. Finally, Dan, I would just urge caution around language, particularly when we come on to talk about the report later on in the meeting. I don't think it's helpful to be talking about election bribes or that sort of language. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just ask a question? Toby and Richard, when did this situation come to light to you? First come to light to you?
Clarify what you mean, please, Dan, by this situation.
How long ago were you aware that you would need to make this approach today?
Chair, thank you. This has obviously been an issue that has been in discussion between unitary authority officers and combined authority officers for some time. In terms of the fact that we got to a point that we weren't able to resolve it, that is very recent. But it is true to say that we've been in discussions for some time. But importantly, and again, and I think this is, I started out by making the point that there is no blame here on anyone. The position amongst the operators has been changing. That has been a moving feast. So actually, even if I knew something last week, it'd very quickly be out of date, because that is the nature of the challenges in the bus market that we're having to deal with. So I can say sincerely that today is the first realistic opportunity that we have had to be able to address this matter.
Okay, Richard, do you want to add to that at all?
No, I think that's completely fair, and we have had to act at speed. As Toby says, actually it has been bewilderingly difficult to keep a track of what is happening in relation to particular routes, particular funding, particular operators. And the first discussion we had about the decision I took yesterday was Tuesday. And we have had to move extremely quickly to do this before the PERDA period. So we really have not been operating right on the edge of what is acceptable in terms of local government governance. But I think the point of principle here, which is one we shouldn't lose sight of, is this is simply to assist the transitional period. And that is just reflecting the reality that what we all hoped were published timetables or published proposals are slipping, not because of factors we have any control over, but they are slipping, and this recognises that reality and tries to do something about it, because our ultimate responsibility is for the people who use these services and rely on them. That's actually what we're here for. So that's why this amendment's on the table.
Okay, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Toby. Can I just ask again, Toby, you said some time, and I always listen very carefully to your wording. Is that weeks, please?
We have been in discussion for some weeks with the combined authority, between unitary authority officers and combined authority officers, around the changing and shifting picture with regards to the contracts and contract amounts that operators are coming forward with. It is not correct, though, to infer that we could have addressed this issue weeks ago, because of how that has been a changing picture, and that we have, things have now come to the point they have.
Okay, Toby. Well, look, you've been aware of it for some weeks. I appreciate some of the tensions and challenges that you clearly have been thinking about. I understand that. I wasn't made party to that. Would have helped if you could have done that. Hearing 10 o'clock today is not sufficient notice, frankly. I think it is contentious. Some of the things that you've said are debatable, I think. And I've had very clear advice from my officer, so I know which way I'm going to be voting. So, okay, can we put that amendment of Toby's to the vote? It's been seconded by Richard. Those in favour, please show. Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, that falls. Right, we now need to go to the original recommendations. Now, recommendation 1, I think if I've got this right, is to review and comment on the mayoral fund revenue budget and forecast as detailed in Appendix 1. All those in favour, please show. Thank you, that's carried unanimously. Then moving on to recommendation 2, reviews and comments on the combined authority revenue budget and forecast as detailed in Appendix 2. Those in favour, please show. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Then recommendation 3 approves that the combined authority undertake a line-by-line budget review on all funding programmes, with progress to be reported back to the committee this coming June 23. All those in favour, please show. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to item 15, the one that I started on and shouldn't have done. Thank you for your patience with me on that. So item 15, this is the Audit Action Plan, feedback from Audit and Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Progress Report. So, Jim, you know I was going to refer to you because I started doing it in the previous item, but I want to thank Jim and Graham MacDonald for undertaking the review through Solace to look at how the West of England Combined Authority can improve and, crucially, deliver for residents. I note the mix of what we do well and where we need to improve. I'm pleased with the focus on the new regional strategic plan. We need plans that are affordable and delivered at pace, of course. And chief executives are already working on a plan to bring in more investment, both public and private, to our region, which I'm very welcoming of. Strong organisations ask for peer reviews, in my view. They're not shy, they're not reticent, they're confident. And I wrote to Michael Gove and received response from Minister Rowley on this as published in the papers, as everyone will probably be aware who's read them. This is not an end, but an important beginning. It really is. I expect recommendations and actions to change as this process continues and as Solace learn more about the challenges and opportunities of our unique and fantastic region. We haven't sat back and waited for the report, welcome as it is. We've already pushed on and started to improve things. Jim, I know you're going to say a few words to us and present a little bit about your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say how welcome I've been made in the West of England. And I travelled down from Manchester today, and it was a bit of a torrid journey, but I managed to make it. I don't intend to go through the whole report because clearly it's been with the papers and you've all read it and you've had a chance to do that. But what I would want to focus on mainly is 5 themes that I suppose encompass everything in the report. The first one, which has been mentioned already today, is about the purpose of the West of England Combined Authority, or the role of the West of England Combined Authority. And I think the report is quite clear that the organisation was established in 2017 and has changed considerably during that time. But during the course of the review, I didn't find there had been a significant opportunity to revisit what the role and the purpose of the Combined Authority was. And one of the recommendations is to have a facilitated discussion about what that role and what that purpose might be going forward and what it would like to be. And that should include all partners, as the report mentions. The second point is around strategy. About 3 years ago, there was a quite successful inclusive process to develop a local industrial strategy for the West of England Combined Authority. But clearly, the economy's moved on a lot since then, and new sectors are coming forward. So it seems appropriate to not only just revisit the industrial strategy as was, but to broaden that out into a regional strategic economic plan, and there are details in the report about some suggestions about how that might happen. And that would give a unified narrative for everybody involved in the West of England Combined Authority who could look outwards towards London and also to national and international investors and business. The third point is around principles. I think there's a huge opportunity for all partners and the West of England Combined Authority to talk about behaviours and explore how they can work better together. And I think there are some suggestions in the report which have already been referred to by Councillor Gollop, I think, earlier. The fourth point is around process and processes and revisiting some of those key opportunities to enable better involvement of all partners and members in the Combined Authority. And again, suggestions in the report are outlined to see whether that might move forward. And then the fifth one, which is a result of the 4 I've mentioned, is around the Constitution. And in the light of work on purpose, role, strategy, principles and processes, I think it's then appropriate to redefine the Constitution, although there will be small amendments as we go through. Indeed, there's one after this agenda item, I know, as well. So I'll just leave my comments and just put the report to the committee on behalf of Solace.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Jim. Really, really great. Okay, so I first of all would like to move the recommendation with its 3 parts as set out in the report. Is there a seconder, please, for that? Marvin, thank you. Would you like to speak now or later, Marvin? Okay, thank you. Okay, does anyone else wish to... let's put that to the... Sorry, we've got a seconder, so... Hang on, does anyone else wish to speak? Beg your pardon. Marvin's holding his position. Toby, would you like to speak to this?
I'm happy to speak as we work our way through the recommendations, Chair.
Richard? Ditto, okay. All right. Okay, let's move to the recommendation and its 3 parts in that case. And if you're okay, I'll take all the recommendations in turn. But first of all, the first recommendation is to consider feedback from the Audit and Overview and Scrutiny committees and approve the action plan as a living document that will continue to be refined as work continues. Toby, do you want to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just turning to Jeff's statement earlier, which I very much welcome, Jeff, and just like to thank you and the committee for the time that they've put into supporting our improvement journey as a combined authority, and welcome your support for the work that's been identified to date. You put a particular challenge on each of us around the principles that are set out on page 11 of Jim's work, And I would just like to confirm that, yeah, I absolutely agree with each of those wholeheartedly, and would continue to approach my work and my role on this body through those principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Would anyone else like to speak on that particular part of the recommendation? Marvin, Richard? Marvin.
Oh, maybe sooner comes sooner. Later comes sooner, will it? So I hope it comes in. This is the appropriate part. First off, I'll answer Jeff's question as well and just say, yeah, we, accept and see the, the strength and the insight that was in the findings of the report, and we should all, as organisations, be in a permanent state of self-reflection and development anyway. So it's a timely external intervention that gives us that space to think about, and I'll just rattle on that first question really, who we are and what we're here to do. And in coming together to form a combined authority, what we've come together for. I suppose I'm particularly exercising around that because we've been asking that question in Bristol City Council as well. What is a local government in today's context? It can't be the same thing in 2023 as it was in 2002 in the 2023 context with 2023 money. We have to be thinking about what we are, and the combined authority itself has gone through lots of change. There probably could have been a lot more discussion early doors, and it's timely that we're having this conversation now. So I think that point you make on purpose is incredibly important. I think the second recommendation I just pick up on, I think is going to be important as well, is the recommendation G on the facilitation work with the business and partner community to redefine the role in terms of reference of a business board to advise, support and challenge. Again, leadership of any place is not about a single person or a single organisation making the decisions. That's just not what people receive. They receive the intersection of decisions made by a whole range of organisations across public sector partners, voluntary community sector, business, faith groups. And so the nature of the relationship between the political leadership as pulled together in the combined authority, the public sector leadership as pulled together in the staff, but also the business community as it exists in the economy is absolutely essential, particularly, I suggest, on two fronts. One is as we make our case with government, and it will be a bit of a challenge to the business community, if our economic prowess as a West of England is not known in Westminster and Whitehall, that's not down to politicians alone. That's also down to the ability or the inability of our business community to also make the case to government that we are worthy of inward investment. But you're not necessarily always helped with that. So we need to think about what's that relationship, how do we operate, not just in the place in which we are existing, but how do we operate facing outward, making the case to government for the big infrastructure development that we want, making case to making the case to markets for the investment we're going to need. Temple Quarter is a classic example of that, where we've got everything lined up, and we've gone out and we got the £100 million for Temple Meads. So I just say those two things really stand out. Lots of very timely, very powerful things in this, I think, but those two are particularly have really captured me, and I'd like to really contribute on those two fronts. I think we also need to be aware that there are very real political and financial consequences for us delivering or not delivering against these recommendations as we've been told. So we need to put some dates against it, and I think we need to have very strong communication with national government about the journey we're going on to deliver against these recommendations and the EY action plan as well.
Thank you, Marvin. Richard.
Thank you. Well, the thing that was interesting in reading the report that Jim has produced is actually how few surprises that I found in it. And the language is very carefully crafted and very well crafted. But actually, there were no surprises in there for me. I've seen many of these type of reports over the years, and they make you stop and think about what you have to do next. But actually, they're helpful in the greater picture. So I welcome the work that's been done. It's very, very thorough, very professional, very high standard. The issue really, which perhaps we're all wrestling it with, is that when the idea of combined authorities first emerged out of the government, of course, they didn't have a particularly clear view of what it was. And if you look at the combined authorities that have been created and are still being created, actually they're all slightly different. They all have different purpose. They're all in response to different things. And the constituent authorities that have moulded them have all tended to work differently to make them work. So I think that's the challenge. That's the point of challenge we're at here, is that what has arrived that we're coping with is something that perhaps was never perfectly thought out in the first place at government level, but it is something now we're having to adapt and amend to make work better. So I don't think we should see this as a threat in any sense. I think it's something that grown-up organisations look at, reflect on, and do something about. And that actually would be my key point, really, is that what we don't want to see is this report sit on a shelf somewhere and gather dust. It needs to be moved forward, and we need to move it forward together. And yeah, it's sensitive stuff, but I think when you look at the resources that are increasingly coming into combined authorities, many of which the benefits flow through to the unitary authorities to make them up, this is big money. And increasingly, as the resources have expanded exponentially, you need slightly different governance and you need slightly different way of doing business, because the more that the budgets expand, the more complexity that is created. And I think if there is a problem, that has been it. That the change over the last few years in terms of the flow of resources, which of course we all welcome, has actually created a governance challenge for us. And I think that's essentially what this report is about. So I welcome it. I hope we can move to the next stage and take it very seriously and very quickly. I would say that as unitary authorities and WECA, we probably have 6 months in which to turn this around into something that changes. I wouldn't go any further than that. I think we need to be moving at that sort of speed. Now, clearly, with elections in South Gloss and Bath North East Somerset, one would need to be satisfied that there was a stable leadership to follow this through, because things can change in elections, as we all know. So I think there is plenty of work to prepare for that to be done, and I hope that by June, when the next meeting is, that we would have a clearer idea about how this is going to go forward. So thank you.
Yes, why don't you, Richard? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to reflect on a few things that we've heard, and just to reflect, I think, actually around the political landscape, both in terms of the current government and the potential future government, and that is that we will see further devolution to our city regions. And if you look at the 2 trailblazer agreements that have been landed, both in the West Midlands and in Greater Manchester this week, they are very significant in terms of the opportunities, but also the responsibilities that come with those deals. And it's a clear signpost that whether it's now or in the future, I think we will see more of those. So this report, but this moment in time, creates the opportunity for us to prepare for those. And it might be that devolution subsequently comes in 1 or 2 or 3 years' time, but if we haven't got the institutional capacity and dare I say it, the heart to take those opportunities forwards, then we will certainly miss out on it. And I would really like to see us being ambitious in creating the platform for which we can take really significant future responsibilities and budget opportunities. And I think that's what I see as a really significant opportunity out of this, and I hope we can all grasp it. And then just finally, to respond to the point on strategy, and we know that more than anything else, people will want to invest when they can see a clear strategic intent and a clear plan. And I think the more quickly we can get to doing that work and getting an agreement to that, then we will be able to leverage both further funding from government, but really importantly, we'll be able to bring forward the private sector matched funding that will make a real step change as well. So just to add to the debate, but thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Okay. Anyone else want to come in on that? So the next part of the recommendation that we'll be voting on, hopefully, shortly, is to note the progress in delivering the emergency action plan. I think we can all... did anyone wish to speak on that? I'm assuming not. And then... sorry, Toby, missed you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did have just some comments and questions, if I may, just in relation to some of the things that the action plan says and just some clarification. So on key recommendation 1 on page 212, there's reference to a management structure under review, and note that this work is ongoing. When is that planned to be presented as a completed piece of work for committee approval?
Just say we haven't firmed up a date. The next stages of what we're going to do in the work. So we've undertaken some actions. I think the review probably broadens those actions in a number of different ways. Really, what we're intending to do now is to start populating it with some of those dates that will bring them back. But we haven't set those dates in stone yet. But we'll bring them back. We'll start working on these things. But if formally, we'll bring them back to the June committee, so they're seen there. And therefore, we won't do anything ahead of the June committee as well, if that's the other side of the question.
Thank you, Richard, for that. My next question was around SR1 on page 210, and obviously it links back through to an earlier agenda item as well. There's reference here to a forward plan. So the second bullet reads here, forward plan would come to this meeting for comment. Has there been a forward plan within the papers that I've overlooked?
So we've managed to do, at the moment, we've done a bit of forward plan work for the audit committee. Managed to take the forward plan there. We're still working on some forward plan work, so we need to bring that back again to the June committee for the committee's main work. The other area we're also looking at is the Overview and Scrutiny committee, and been in discussion with the exiting chair around some changes that we want to do around that as well.
Thank you. So I think if you're reflecting on comments that the audit committee made, I think I've just appealed to you that the sooner that can be circulated in draft form, the better, and not leave it until the shortly before the June committee. There's also my final question on this section was just in relation to conflict of interest, and this is linked with SR3. Again on page 212, and there's reference to a protocol as a completed action. I don't recall seeing that protocol. Is it something that has been circulated to committee members?
The protocol was published on the Combined Authorities website last year, about March. It was agreed. I had discussions with the chair of audit at the time. But I'm happy we can bring that again. But I mean, in some senses, I think events moved on and it had already been there and published. But I would accept it may not be the easiest thing to find on the website, along with the council's constitution. That may just be a matter of the search terms, but it's there, and I'm happy to forward links to everybody so they can see that.
Yep.
I think I think it covers the points anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else on that particular one? Okay. In that case, let's move to the third part of the recommendation to agree in principle the broad areas as set out in paragraph 2.3 and presented by the Solace peer reviewer, and delegate to the combined authority chief executive in consultation with the chief executives of the unitary authorities to incorporate into the action plan as appropriate. Okay. Does anyone want to speak on that one? Toby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I could also just say just a few words on this. So, firstly, yeah, just to thank the report author for for his work in a very short space of time to have engaged with each of us on an individual basis, and then to sort of pull all that together and the emerging themes from that. I think it's a really good piece of work. I was certainly of the view when we considered this towards the end of last year that we did need an independent presence to support us on our improvement journey, and I'd just like to thank Jim for that and his efforts and the work that's been produced to date, recognising this is a sort of two-step process, but this is a very welcome sort of completion of the first stage of that. I think that we absolutely do need to come together to jointly agree what our shared objectives are for the region, and recognising that we're in a now a far more changed landscape than we were when we first created the combined authority. I continue to be very proud of the role that myself and other councillors across the region played to ensure that we had a devolution deal, and that devolution deal was approved across 3 of the councils, and that we now have a combined authority chaired by a mayor, and I continue to believe that is the right model for devolution as we seek to take greater control and greater responsibility for the things that are important to us in the region, and to continue those discussions with government. I think we have been too slow as a region to revisit that, and I think that this work is an important shot in the arm to us to get on and have those shared conversations and to agree a shared vision for the region, and the mechanisms that we need to decide upon to realise each and every one of our shared goals. I'd also just like to take this moment, again, because it's reflected in the report, just to thank Richard for his work and continuing work to change the culture since his arrival. It's reflected in the report here. Around the progress that's been made. We might have the odd disagreements about IRS 9 and the extent, IF 9, sorry. IFRS 9. Richard, you're arguing with me again. You're trying to help. and statutory overrides. But yeah, I'd just like to thank for that, because I think it's important to recognise that whilst there have been challenges with political relationships, there have also been challenges with officer relationships, and we cannot have an organisation firing on all cylinders unless both are pointing in the right direction. So thank you for the work that goes on in that regard, and look forward to revisiting this at our next meeting and being able to give confidence to members of the Audit Committee and Scrutiny Committee that we are indeed making progress with each and every one of the recommendations that have been identified as needing progress to be made. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Toby. Marvin.
I'll just add something that's not necessarily recommendations, but could be opportune, actually. So the consequences of what we do, what we achieve or do not achieve as a combined authority stretch into every aspect of people's lives in the city. Because of poverty, housing delivery, transport connectivity, they have health consequences. I think maybe one of the things that we could do as part of our own response to this as a collective is broaden out the conversation a bit and pull in some of those key partners across the region. And we have a health service, we have a fire service that operates, covers our patch, we have a police service, we have representatives of our voluntary community sector. I don't think we need to necessarily make an industry of it, but we could create the space just to hear back from some of those partners across the region as to what their hopes are for the combined authority, but also ask them what they would offer to the combined authority patch as well in the way they offer it. Might add a bit, another bit of dynamism to the way we think about our role, our future, and the constitution that will support that.
Okay, thank you, Marvin. Richard? No? Okay. So if we're in agreement, I'll take all those recommendations together. Is that okay, guys? Rather than go through each of the 3 parts. So all those in favour, please, of the recommendations, 1 to 3, as it were, or one recommendation, in fact, on the paper, please show now. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much unanimously. Jim, thank you so much for making a treacherous, terrible, awful journey from Manchester to be with us today, but we do genuinely appreciate it. It was important to see you today, and I hope you feel that too as you head back. Are you going back today?
I am, if you'll excuse me.
You're a sucker for
I'm
punishment.
Stay for item 16 if you don't.
Yeah, Cheltenham's still available on the way up. So there you are. You might want to
Gold Cup's been and gone.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
We'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Thank you. Okay, in that case, can we now move on to item 16, the Combined Authority Committed Constitutional Update. I would ask the committee to approve this change, which I hope is self-explanatory. It ensures that all legal advice is overseen or commissioned in accordance with the monitoring officer's requirements. I'd now like to move the recommendation as set out in the report. Does anyone want me to read that recommendation? Yes, okay. The recommendation is, it is recommended that an additional paragraph 3.8e is added to the functions of the monitoring officer in the authority's constitution. E. Combined authority officers and members are prohibited from obtaining legal advice without the written agreement of the combined authority monitoring officer. All legal services will be commissioned in accordance with arrangements settled by the monitoring officer from time to time. These arrangements will be set out in a legal services protocol which will be published on the authority's internet. Okay, is there a... Richard, you've had a chance to digest that one. I read it out fast. Yeah, you got the gist of it, I hope. Okay, I'd like to move that in that case. Is there a seconder for that, please? Richard, I think you just got there first. Okay, do any members wish to speak on this particular item? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Toby.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, just a brief word on this. So and speaking in support of the recommendation and sort of recognising that this is the first steps in updating the Constitution, and I welcome the further update that will be undertaken following the independent peer review, because this is just one part of a more thorough piece of work that we need to do around the Constitution. And I think this amendment in particular to the Constitution is important. This does reflect some of the concerns that were raised by the auditors, to ensure that officers don't again seek their own legal advice, given that does come at significant expense to the local taxpayer, because I think it is important in ensuring value for money that where resources are available, that we target those towards frontline services like buses, and not on expensive legal advice that's unnecessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that observation, Toby, and comment. Okay, in that case, I put forward the recommendation that's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show now. Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. In that case, I declare the meeting closed after 3 hours and 17 minutes, I think it is. Well done, everybody. Very warm room, by the way. I was going to take my jacket off, then I wasn't. But as I close, can I again thank Winston particularly for his hard work and contributions to our efforts since I've become Metro Mayor. Thank you.
Is that you done today?